Hey, Triv,
Yeah.
are you ready to talk about The Reckoning?
Yeah. Just jump.
Yes, let's talk about it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium spoiler discussions. This, of course, will be a spoiler discussion for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Be aware, be afraid, light the match. If you have not seen this movie yet, do not watch this review. And then come back and watch it. Yes,
Also,
after you watch the
also,
movie.
if you've seen Dead Reckoning 2, come on and watch this because we're just sticking to part one, not part two.
Exactly. So, Triv, we're back. This is going to be the last video for Mission Impossible we do for at least a year, unless the writers go on strike or the actors go on strike, which they are planning to do here soon.
Oof.
So it might be a couple years before we finish out Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Yeah, it's gonna be like fun. It's gonna be like 6 years from now. We're gonna come back. We're like, wait, what are we talking about? So
Exactly.
yeah.
What was my ranking
Um
again?
So yeah, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is the first part of a two-part series of the seventh and eighth film in the Mission Impossible franchise. It of course is a very long film, part 1, and I had to see this movie twice, and I still don't know everything that I probably missed things. We're gonna miss things. So I apologize, but I have seen this movie twice. Trev has now seen this movie once, so I might have to lead you a little bit into this, into the plot of this movie because it's very dense. But I put out my non-spoiler review for this, so I know kind of about, you guys should know what I think of this movie by now. But we'll get into the details of it. Like I said, the synopsis is something we'll talk about a little bit about. I don't know if I want to go to like all point by point on the synopsis because there's a lot of stuff, but we'll talk about the bits and parts and major points of this movie, and we're gonna get into some problems I have with this Dead Reckoning Part 1, and there's a few. This is a movie, as you're aware, and I made a joke about it in my review, was a movie that I was 3 years anticipating at my most anticipated list. I always joked about how the fact, especially this year, that I put it as 1A in my most anticipated list because it was originally supposed to come out in 2020. Is it 2020 or 2021? It was one of those dates that it was originally supposed to release. And so the first year that it was supposed to release, I put it in my top 10. I might put it top number one or something like that. And then the pandemic happened. Unfortunately, pandemic shut down everything. It was a big mess. But I knew that this film was going to take a while, and unfortunately it took longer than it was supposed to. But as I've said, I was really excited for this film. Triv, I don't. What was your excitement for this film at all? Was it anything at all? Was it less excitement than mine? I mean, what they going in, not your review, but like, what was your excitement for this film? Before we even talked about this,
Yeah.
doing this thing. Yeah,
Just from an excitement standpoint, I try to with a lot of these movies, I try to go in as blind as possible. I think
yeah,
I saw one of the early trailers, but by and large, I tried to stay as far away from stuff as possible. Like, you saw them doing the big stunt that kind of defines this movie. There was a few other behind the scenes things that I had seen, but by and large, I went into this, beyond what we talked about, as blind as I could. So
right.
my levels of excitement, I guess, because we've kind of watched these as we went. I tried to maintain kind of an even keel because, I mean, I guess I just didn't know what to expect, and I didn't want to screw up my anticipation for it based on like, oh my god, it's gonna be fantastic. um
Yeah, no. The funny part about the whole situation is, and you probably have had this happen to you before, but the thing I said in my review, the worry thing about my excitement for this film is the anticipation sometimes, especially if you're like a movie nerd like myself,
oh yeah.
can like raise. Talk about Star Wars and Phantom Menace and stuff like that. Your anticipation raises after each year goes by.
Yeah.
So would say 1 year goes by, you're anticipating. I mean, it doesn't necessarily the best thing in the world to release a new movie after a year like Saul does, but your anticipation rises each level each year because of how excited you are to watch the movie and how good the last movie was. I mean, that's kind of where I landed with this
Yeah.
film is my anticipation, as you're aware. I mean, anybody can guess from my reviews of these movies, was as high as it can be. It was. I
Yeah.
actually think this movie was more anticipated to me than Across the Spider Verse,
Oh
just
wow.
because of how long we've been waiting for this film.
Right.
and the idea of like, this being a two-part film, what were they going to do next, how are they going to top themselves after the Halo jump and stuff like that, and the helicopter sequence. It was something that could have failed in my expectations of like excitement, which is very possible. Look at Dial of Destiny. But yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's where my excitement was, and I was curious of what your excitement was for this film, because you come from this as a different angle than I do, coming from the fact that I've seen all these movies in the theater. I'm going to see this movie in IMAX some point before Oppenheimer comes out, and I was just curious of what your excitement level was for this film, because like 100%. I said, you come at it from a completely different angle than I do. So
I will say, I was talking to a friend of mine about this before things came up, and I think he summed my feelings about kind of Mission Impossible in general pretty well. Like we've talked about, I saw I think 1 and 2 in the theaters, and I saw 3 after that. But Mission Impossible is never a movie that I needed to see in the theater, but I was so glad to see them when I did. It just changed my entire view of it. But it's one of those things where someone has to say, hey, let's watch this, because it's just not the first thing that comes to my mind. The kind of movies that I tend to gravitate towards are not these. And to be able to have, like, even with 2, the level of just stuff that goes on, it's incredible. I mean, they spend more on one singular thing than most movies that I tend to watch. Like, that's more than their entire budget. So it is a different level of stuff. So if that makes sense.
We're talking... Right. No, yeah, absolutely. We're talking about the difference between, let's say, Future War, which probably cost $5.
Yeah, exactly.
And Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, which costs $300 million. It's like, the level of quality is going to be a little, but that's what you're known for. So I definitely understand.
But they'll never do cardboard boxes as well as Future War did.
Yeah, I mean, true. Don't put it past Tom Cruise to cardboard it up,
Oh, man, his next movie, he's got like a flyer made out of cardboard or something. I'm gonna glide off Mount Everest with this cardboard box, and it'll work.
I do think that one of the set pieces in Dead Reckoning Part 2 is there was a video of Tom Cruise on an airplane. No, part 2.
Oh,
that's not in Part 1. Is that Tom Cruise did a behind the scenes video where he's holding on to I think it's like a prop plane or something like that, and they're shooting like an IMAX shot. I think that's going to be in the second movie, but because it's not, he's like wearing a different suit than he wears in the entire first movie, so it's got to be for Part 2. But with that said, Triv, my thoughts of this movie. My excitement level. You see, your excitement level is, a little more tepid than mine. Not saying that's a bad thing, but a little more restrained, I guess, than mine is. You went to see this movie. You drove out of your way to see this movie. I can kind of gist to where you're gonna say, but is this movie?
Do you?
You really don't. But in all honesty, how is this movie to you? So do you find yourself out there in the world trying to find a book to read? Everything is not speaking to you. You want to find something a little more over the top and crazy and silly, unlike the typical tropey books that are out today. Well, personally, I found a book just for you. This book, which is called J.R. Castillo Comes Home, which is written by Johnny A. Mann, is a story of a writer from that comes back to his hometown. He's a noir writer, and he tries to get back with his high school crush, as well as dealing with a serial killer in his hometown. And as you expect, if you read Johnny A. Mann's material before, it's over the top, it's silly, it's graphic, and it's a lot of fun because there's a lot of heart and inventiveness put into it. But it's also a book that, is unique for its own right, and it's a book that I definitely recommend. If you read anything else that he's written, it's something that you might find fun, you might find entertaining, and I highly recommend it. So, definitely check it out. It's currently on Barnes & Noble's online retail store. But once again, that is J.R. Castillo Comes Home, which is written once again by Johnny A. Mann. And it's a book that I highly recommend. So definitely check it out, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, so you have to remember a couple of things. One, like I said, I when I sit down to watch these movies for these reviews, I was blown away. All of them were incredible. I also have not seen one of these in theater since either 2 or 3. I'm pretty sure 2.
Oh, actually, let me ask you this: did you what for? Did you see it like Dolby Theater, or did you see it just like a regular?
It was Dolby, but it was also like an IMAX, like a 2D IMAX, is what
nice.
So I also got an
Okay.
IMF pin when I left the theater because I
Yes.
saw it like whatever advanced screening or whatever the hell you want to call
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But yeah,
Nice.
no, it was like I say, it was a great screen. Like I know it's not a 6 foot IMAX in 3D or anything, but it was a really great IMAX screen and all that good
Wow,
stuff.
it was IMAX screen was bigger than as big as me, huh?
Absolutely as big as you.
6 foot IMAX.
No, for fuck's sake. Six, yeah, anyway. Yeah,
I'm
the six
kidding,
foot
Jake.
IMAX.
I'm
Yes,
kidding,
that's
Trish.
right.
Yeah,
It
yeah, I
was a
got you.
6 foot IMAX because I'm only about
Yeah.
2 inches tall. So that,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Anyway, sorry about that. But okay, so all that aside, I had a fantastic fucking time with this movie. And maybe it is like I think the theater setting definitely changes all that, but
Yeah.
this one rocketed to the top of my list. I
Really?
absolutely adore this movie. Like I am such a whore for a really great car chase. And
Yeah, yeah.
and obviously we're gonna get more into it, but like,
You like your Fiats? You little
oh
yellow
man,
Fiats?
the car chase through Rome. I've spent some time in Rome and I know how like driving the streets of Rome is insane. And I just,
Yeah.
that was nuts. It was one of the best car chases I've seen in a movie. Like they took what Italian Job did with Mini Coopers and did it with a fucking Fiat, and that's so awesome to me. Just the humor. There was so much great humor. It's not a perfect movie, but like
Yeah.
the idea of like that the thing that they depend on above and beyond everything else is their tech, and to not be able to use the tech or to have it be like we don't know if we can trust it, that it is such a current thing, and I absolutely
And
adored that.
right. And the funny thing is you've been talking about this since I think the fifth movie or something like that, about how Ethan's story is much more personal. I think in
Oh yeah.
Fallout, you said in this movie does that in spades. We actually learn a little bit about the back history of Ethan Hunt, which I was not expecting. And it makes this movie, I don't know if you feel this way like I do, but this movie feels very not only personal to Ethan Hunt, very close to him, but it also feels smaller in sense to the other movies. I'm not talking about on the scale of scope and
Right.
the action set pieces, but you look at how big and bombastic this franchise has become, and this movie feels for $300 million, it feels a lot smaller. It feels a lot more personal and close, and it's a movie that feels that it's really getting to the heart of who Ethan Hunt is as a character and how he is justifiable in what he does, how
Right.
he's willing to save the people he loves more than he is himself, and how his actions and consequence or his actions and purpose through this entire franchise, as Henry Zerni's Kitcher says, not only is going to cost him dearly, but is going to have consequences on who he is. So he's done all this stuff for the IMF, and here he is as somebody who has been put into a situation, which we'll talk about, which any member of his crew could be visibly hurt, affected, killed, or put into dire situations. And it's as much as I have problems with this film, that is really well done script writing, because we're in our seventh film of this franchise and they're giving us personal information about where Ethan Hunt and how he began, and they're focusing on a really depth of quality level of his character development, and everything affects him in every sort of way. And you see him in Haley Atwell's character of Grace, and you see how he's very protective of this individual trying to help him, and it shows like a very different side than what we saw in the very first movie, which is him very young, just more worried about the mission than he is about protecting people.
Right.
It's very interesting. So I don't know.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think there's a couple of things. One, with age to some extent, and not to. I mean, in the grand scheme, the age doesn't really matter in this respect. But I do think that with a certain level of age comes that change from rough and tumble cowboy compared to guy that slows. Not that he slows down, but he takes a minute to think beyond the thing. And not that, I mean,
Yeah,
he's always been able to play like six steps ahead of everyone that's around him, but I think there's more thought that goes into the why and the how of everything. Besides that, I mean, he's got a team that, despite him saying leave, go away, I'm on this own, they're family. There's that
yeah,
whole thing of that reoccurring set of characters, even if there's a little bit of a revolving door. you still get those people that keep showing up. And, they're not just, team members, they're friends, they're confidants, they're all that stuff. And two, I on the subject of like seeing kind of into Ethan's past, that's kind of all of their past, really. Like every single person we find out, with IMF, they were given a choice. And they were in
Yeah.
situations where it was, okay, you're either gonna go this way or that way. So I appreciated that. But they didn't let it go too deep as far as like it didn't take them down a route where they're sitting at the bar going, "Oh, bartender, pour me another shot. Oh God, I'm so upset." It's still not light per se, but there is still that level of understanding that where I came from and what I am,
Well,
it defines who I am, but it doesn't stop me from doing what I need to do.
yeah, and there's been movies in the past, a la Fast and Furious. I'm gonna throw them under the bus
Gasp.
where 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 they have a tendency to give us too much of the back history. And I don't know what Dead Reckoning Part 2 is going to bring to the table when it comes to his past, but I like that I like the information that we're giving is in service to this character, the villain is in this movie, how it relates to him, but it gives us enough information to know that Ethan Hunt's character was put into a situation that he either had to make one choice or another. And so that I do like, because you could, like you said, go sit at a bar and go, here's Ethan Hunt when he was 2 years old, and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't really, this is not pertinent information. So you're given the information that is pertinent, which is the stuff you need to know to show why Ethan Hunt's the way he is now, but also allow us to see a little bit about the humanity of who Ethan Hunt was and how he became an IMF agent. So it's kind of nice to see that they are restrained and they're going back in time history, which is fine. If they want to do a prequel Ethan Hunt story, you could do a prequel Ethan Hunt story. But when you have a story that is a concurrent running story, this is enough information that you need, and enough information given that it makes it justifiable. So instead of us sitting at a bar talking for 3 hours about what Ethan Hunt did before, here it's just you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But anyways, with that said, so this would be like number one on your list, huh?
Number one or two, I think, and I know it could. There, the thing is, I hesitate to put it as one or two because I do think that the theater experience and the fact that it was the first one I've seen in
Yeah.
theater for freaking ever does make a difference with that. But I'm also not going to
Yeah,
discount
yeah.
the fact that I walked out of there and I had a great time. I was laughing my ass off. I was like every single stunt. And I
And
know that this is not a perfect movie by any stretch,
no.
but there
Oh
was
no,
so
we're gonna
much.
talk about how imperfect it is. Trust me, we're
No,
gonna talk
no,
about
but I
that.
just
Yeah,
like the stunts.
yeah.
It seemed like they were more honed than they have
Oh
been in the
yeah,
past.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Um,
yeah, I
yeah.
mean, the other thing I gotta ask you too is how quick did this movie move for you? Because I've seen it twice. It doesn't feel like a 2 hour and 45 minute movie.
Oh God, it moves like lightning.
Yeah, it's
Like I looked
crazy. Like
down, I looked down at my phone and it was a 7 o'clock show. All this, I looked down at my phone and it's like 9:15, and it's like holy shit. I mean, the Nuvi, like the whole Nuvi thing with Maria Menounos was sitting there like, oh my God, I've only been watching this for 5 minutes and it sucks. But then yeah, the movie came along and it's like holy shit.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so expertly edited and
Oh
paced that
yeah.
it's like, and the problem is, it moves quickly, and I still feel like there's stuff that can be cut out of this movie. Like we'll talk about it, but
Really?
yeah, I mean, the main reason I put it, we both talked about it. We're not the biggest fans of rankings, but we do one for like the Twilight Zone and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
no, of
But
course.
the reason I put this at number 4 on my list is because one, I think Rogue Nation to me is a perfect action film. That's just how I look at it.
No,
And
more
then
power
Mission
to you.
Impossible has a lot of nostalgia, and then Fallout is of course where Fallout is. But the people will, if they read that, they may think that I didn't like this movie. It's hard to put a list of Mission Impossible films that isn't part 2 in a ranking list because they're all so good that
Right.
it's almost like, which one do you find the one that was most enjoyable to you? It becomes impossible how to rank these lists. It's actually more difficult. It's actually impossible as we've talked about. Thanks to Anthony Hopkins.
It's mission difficult or Mission
Or
Impossible, not
Mission
mission
Impossible, not
difficult.
Mission. Yeah. And so putting it at number 4 is on the aspect of like there were things that I really got annoyed by this film more than the other 3 films, and that's kind of where it lands. But there's no denying how good this film is. I mean, I'm going to see it a third time in the theater very, very soon because I want to see it in IMAX, because I do want to see what scenes they shot in IMAX. But yeah, I mean that's kind of where I wanted to lead off with the rankings, because I putting it at number 4 does not make this movie a bad film. It just makes it a little bit lesser of the other films, just on the nature of it's also a part 1,
Right.
and a part 1 leads into some of my problems with this film on the aspect of like, do I hate this part because what are they gonna do with these characters in part 2? It's very difficult to want to complain until you've seen part 2, but I have to bring up these parts because there is one defining part, at least for I think, that really, really irked me a lot. And like I said, we'll talk about it.
I will say too, like for myself personally, I preferred Avengers Infinity War to Endgame. Like I seem to like, and with this cliffhanger, it was a cliffhanger obviously, but it didn't, they tied up a lot of things in ways that not every cliffhanger will.
Somebody actually compared it to Fellowship of the Ring, where
100%.
It has a defining cliffhanger, but there is enough completed where it doesn't feel like you're being screwed. It's not Fast. I know you probably haven't. I know you haven't seen Fast X, but the way they cliffhanger that movie, literally cliffhanger that movie.
I see what you did
it defies all logic and purpose, and it just is very irksome and stuff like that. Very, pisses you off a little bit. But here it feels like, okay, cool. I really want to see part 2, but you're not screwing me over in the cliffhanger part, that type of thing. So
well, even and not that it's quite the same, and I think it was well done in the way that they did it, but even Across the Spider-Verse had quite a decent cliffhanger about it.
Yeah, it did, but people were going, oh no. People in this movie were like, okay. Nobody was like,
but I think too, this one was out front about it. Like it said part 1. You didn't get that with Fast X or Across the Spider-Verse. Even though to some extent they said, hey, there's going to be another one coming out to finish the trilogy, and there's gonna be some things left unsaid. You didn't get that as hardcore with this. It was very much a case of kind of a pre-established stopping point where the greater arc isn't done, but the main things that were happening within that moment were finished.
Exactly. So anyways, this movie is 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's probably 2 hours. If I count it right, there's like 16 minutes of credits in this movie. So it's probably like 2 hours and 25 minutes or whatever. But yeah, this movie is it's a movie about AI technology. It's a movie about something called The Entity. Which I made a joke. I'm like, oh, so this is a movie that stars Ron Silver, huh? And Barbara Hershey.
Oh, dude, and it's such a it's genuinely uncomfortable.
Yeah, you were telling me a little bit, because I don't think I've ever seen The Entity, but you told me a little bit about it. But
yeah, it's a thing,
right? But this movie also, as they've taught, it doesn't mention it, but it kind of hints about it. It's a movie about irrelevancy, about the use of technology, and how we've talked about this before, how technology is starting to take over, or it's pretty much taking over the society, and how put into the wrong hands be not only corruptible, but we can be a serious issue. But it mainly focuses on whether the IMF is even worth having around anymore. And as we can see, and as we've learned, yes, yes, it is, because AI technology, especially when it gets to this level, which it will at some point.
Oh yeah.
And there's that term where we kind of fuse with technology and ourselves. There's I think it's called singularity point. I think that's what it's called, where technology starts fusing with like human culture and stuff like that. And this is a thing that is a real worrisome. And the one thing that I love about the series, and it does really well, is it uses fear of technology and bioweapons and everything that we can come to fear, nuclear weapons, and it is actually very prescient to that current state. So Triv, you made it very clear on how you feel about, entertainment using AI technology, how
Oh
Photoshop and
God.
Premiere is using AI technology. And I think that's a thing that's also here where Tom Cruise is afraid of, like, he's not afraid of, but he's seeing where filmmaking is going, where the idea of the theater experience going away, the idea of, like, us getting more into the binge watching, getting more into, staying at home to watch movies. And it's a very old school versus new school mentality of, here is a device, a MacGuffin, which is the AI technology called the Entity, and him being confronted with his age and his past and everything of that nature. And I wonder if you agree with that at all, or if you find different things that you take out of it, because that's what I was starting to take out of it for my second watch, is somebody who is trying to keep, like, Christopher Nolan and Spielberg and stuff like that, and maybe Martin Scorsese, trying to keep that old school mentality still alive as the new mentality starts to rush in and take over with the TikTok and the threads and Instagram and stuff like that, compared to, like, watching a YouTube video and stuff like that. And I wonder where you lean when it comes to that kind of stuff, because it was starting to hit me pretty hard, especially on my second watching.
Right.
So
I think with everything it's balance. It's like, I mean, because they mentioned crypto and they kind of talk about how, like, when someone is paid off, it's in Bitcoin, or no, I don't think it's Bitcoin.
yeah,
It's in it. It's crypto and such. There's always going to be that tipping point. It's like, movies against radio, and then movies against TV, and then movies against the internet, and there's always going to be a thing. And I think that there's always a place for those things. It's just a matter of balance. My bigger issue is, like, in where we are now, like, AI has a place, but the thing is that it's still being experimented with to see where it fits best. And there's a lot of shit that just because you can does not mean you should, kind of a thing.
yeah.
That's
Look at you,
what a lot of
Skynet.
it. Well, yeah, exactly. And that it's a tool like everything else, but you also have to understand that you cannot rely on that alone. It's like, if you have a kid, sitting them down in front of the TV and expecting that to be a parent is not going to work. Like that's
Yeah,
kind of that's not the that's it's an off kilter way of saying it, but that's kind of what it comes to with all of that stuff. When it comes to this, yes, I do think that there is some points about irrelevancy and kind of like the old school way of doing things, especially when the world is moving forward. I mean, they talk about it in the sense of, like, greater good versus, whatever the key kind of represents to that. But I do think too, the idea of, like, this thing that is a bedrock piece for IMF and, kind of the spy community in general, and they even talk about it. They rely on the ability to use satellites and, tracking software and all this stuff, like
well,
everything
that's
digital.
yeah,
And to
that's the
lose
thing in
that,
general,
right. But
right?
I do love the fact that they have to go back to analog, because for so long, like, whether it be we've talked quite a bit about the masks, whether it be the inability to use a mask, or sorry, whether it be the ability to, show up as anyone. And that's one of the things that one of the biggest downfalls of Mission Impossible 2 was its reliance on that kind of stuff. But the ability to just say, oh, I've got a piece of tech that can do this and piece of tech that can do that, to not be able to do that, it takes it back to those people, and they have to think outside the box to get what they need to get done.
Yeah, and it also shows, just in a sense of, like, how technology can kind of ruin the lives of individuals, especially if it doesn't work. I mean, you see, Benji and Luther, they're reliant on their computers, and they're reliant on, being able to be one step ahead of everyone else. And when they don't have that ability, and it's similar to, like, you or I or anybody in this world, we're so reliant on the technology of phones and computers and whatever technology, the different forms of factors, the Amazon and stuff like that. And it's pretty interesting to watch what would happen if that technology got out of control and you have to find a way to shut it down. How does that affect the human psyche, especially in this day and age? And that's exactly what you're talking about here with the analog and stuff like that. It's like
Yeah.
they have to go back to, the old school mentality, and it's really a commentary on, technology in general, just how dangerous it can be put in the wrong hands. And it really shows
Truthfully,
when,
yeah,
yeah,
truthfully there, but also almost worse than that is what happens when it goes away,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I mean, there's a time where, I mean, the one thing that the series kind of got away from is, or not really got away from, but the old. I actually you can watch the TV series on Paramount Plus right now. So I
Mhm.
went back and watched like a couple episodes, and like how quaint and how it is the '60s, but like the technology was a lot smaller, so they had to rely on their skills and their Mission Impossible spy sense. And here, Ethan Hunt has like he can like see anything with a pair of glasses, or he has, a phone that can like find a car for him and stuff like that. It just, when you have all that stuff taken away because you're dealing with a rogue AI technology and a kind of cult like personality, it's almost scary to think about, because you're so reliant on the thing that could destroy you. And back in the day, they had to rely on, a map, and whether they can find themselves in a place within 30 minutes because they have to find the location on a map and stuff like that. And I'm not saying technology is not used in like a Mission Possible series, a TV series, but here, walking through the Dubai airport, the two tech guys are able to put off the police force, the Shea Wiggum character and stuff like that, by masking the image of Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt's character onto another body. So you take that away, and the people that are relevant become irrelevant and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting to see how technology is so prescient in our society and can be used for bad and good and all that
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
So
One other thing too that I kind of found really interesting, and we don't we get a little bit with the entity, but obviously that's going to kind of be the climactic big bad fight in part 2, I'm sure. It's said a couple of times that the entity can see every single, scenario out there, and it kind of uses probability to figure out the ones that are most likely. And having seen the ones that are the most likely scares the AI. So the fact that this nearly sentient being, but still artificial, feels fear. I love that play. I think that's really cool to show that
yeah,
even though it's not quote real, it still has the ability to feel fear based on the odds.
yeah, and it's the idea of like how AI technology will one day become sentient. Boston, MIT developing robots, and us using AI technology to recode like a picture or something like that is rudimentary right now. But there's going to be a singularity point where AI actually exceeds the human brain, which is starting to do. There's certain things that AI, computer technology, programming can do that we can't even comprehend, which is crazy to think about, kind of scary. That's why, people always joke about Skynet, but I mean, there might be one day where we're relying on AI technology to control our weapons of war. And that's a scary thought when you think
Oh,
about it.
absolutely. Well, and even I remember there was a couple of years back where the computer system for some business or for some big corporate business was controlled by AI, and it
Yeah,
something happened, it glitched and it fired this person, and there was no way for this person who hadn't done anything wrong to get their job back or rehired or anything, because the system had locked that specific person out. And they were unable
that's crazy.
to override it because of like the things that they put in place. So, it's I think it's like everything. I mean, look at crypto, a year ago, and how hot NFTs were and all that kind of stuff. With everything, there kind of gets over that hump, and it's used, but it's kind of like evened out a bit. And I know that this is a different thing, and it's constantly learning and growing and such. But I do think to some extent, at least within usage, to kind of figure where it works best, it will
Yeah,
eventually find those places. It's just a matter of making
right,
sure that it doesn't, lead to the wrong places. Like writing scripts
right.
and shit like that and editing. I'm sorry, no, that's that's not how
Yeah, I
that
mean,
works.
it's been
Fuck that.
proven that doesn't work
Well,
right
of course
now. Like,
not. There's no
yeah,
context. There's
but
the understanding about
that's
the dynamics about what a scene
yeah,
has. doesn't just, you can't program that.
This thing here about the kind of main structure crux of the story of this film is about a technology that if anybody could get their hands on could basically be God, could be the rulers of the world. It's a thing that, you know, Adolf Hitler or Stalin or Napoleon or, you know, Genghis Khan or anybody, if they had this ability back in their time and era, could do dangerous I mean, they already did dangerous and scary things, but think about this technology in those hands of people that are fascist dictator rulers. You know, here, what if Russia got a hold of it? What if, you know, the United States got a hold of it, which is kind of a big play in this movie. The endless possibilities of like how scary that thought and idea is what this movie is also insinuating and talking about. And it's very in your face about the scary nature of that situation. And it's really interesting to think about. It's like one of those things that not even James Bond really does a lot of times. James Bond, I mean, focuses on like real world scenarios, but I think the James Bond films have gotten really outlandish in their ideologies and ideological nature, which I'm not discounting James Bond. I'm just saying
No,
when you
fair.
look at a film like this, it's really hitting to the point of what would happen if something got into the hands of very dangerous people, and what are the people who are willing to sacrifice and willing to uphold and save, or willing, what lengths are they willing to do that and willing to save the society as a whole. I mean, it's a really interesting kind of thought-provoking idea if you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's something that you go back to the earliest days of cinema, and there's always going to be things that are cautionary tales for what could come. I mean, anything. I mean, books,
Yeah.
the anything that can be creative. I mean, that's one of the things people write about, because you know the future is always fluid, always in motion, and
Yeah.
you don't know which way the roads are going to lead. You know, even things that are kind of out of left field. That, you know, look at Idiocracy. Like, how much of
Oh
that
yeah.
is truthful to today? You know, and that was,
Yep.
you know, that wasn't that long ago made. But I mean, that's those kinds of things, those kinds of commentaries, they're nothing new. They go back as far as media goes back. You know, cave
Yeah,
drawings
I
are
mean
probably back then.
1984.
So yeah,
Yeah.
1984. I mean, Jules Verne. I mean, yeah, it's not a new thing by any stretch of the imagination, and it's important that that be out there, because it does open
Right.
your eyes to possibilities. I mean, for Fahrenheit 491. I mean, for God's sake, or sorry, 451, not 491. What the hell? I'm sorry, I'm a dumbass tonight.
I mean,
Blah.
that's the sequel. That's the sequel to
Yeah.
it. I just saved you. It's
Thanks.
not. It's not Mission Difficult. It's Mission Impossible. I saved you
Oh
from it.
God,
I hung from the
keep
rafters.
just keep moving it along. Keep moving it
I know.
along.
But you know, that's just kind of how I look at it from a plot perspective. I mean, there are many other things you could talk about with this, without your, with about, you know, the morality and like your, you know, how you view yourself and how things become to start to change as the world moves on and stuff like that. And you know, this movie starts out, and I didn't think there was going to be an opening title sequence to this movie, because this movie is like a 30-minute prologue. It's almost like 25 or 20 to 25 minutes of like opening introduction stuff. And I think it's fascinating that the first thing that happens in this movie is we're introduced to a Russian submarine called the Sevastopol, which is this silent running, like state of the art submarine. And they're in a geographical location known as Dead Reckoning, which I didn't know. I thought Dead Reckoning was like we're reckoning with, you know, the possible
The
future of
dead.
like, well, I mean that no, but Dead Reckoning actually has a specific thing. And it says is the process of calculating the current position of moving objects by using a previously determined path or fix, incorporating estimate speed, heading, and elapsed time. But I didn't realize that Dead Reckoning actually had a specific defined meaning. I just thought it was a really cool title, though they added a part one to it. But I mean, I gotta ask you about this. Like, we're introduced to this group of individuals that it's a submarine. They have this technology that they're basically testing, like a war simulation, and they get confronted with a sub that comes out of nowhere, shoots a missile at them, and they shoot a missile at it, we find out the AI technology is able to comprehend that. We see it's like a real. I love the little sphere that is being kept in that can kind of keep it hidden. I love the idea that they feel like they're silent, but is it basically a missile gets shot at them, and then they shoot a missile at it, and they find out that the technology is basically screwing with them, and then they get destroyed by their own missile, and it causes basically implosion of the submarine. It's basically the crux of the MacGuffin of the movie. They have, the people have to find out where the submarine's at, where the AI technology's at. But I ask you about this whole scenario about the idea of this technology has basically almost become rogue in its nature, and now it's using it's using the people that are trying to use it against them. And what do you think about that whole kind of opening sequence?
I think it worked very well. I mean, it kind of, because the technology, how do you explain that to your average layperson? And I think they did they did a lot of show don't tell with the way that it all worked. I thought it was pretty well done. And the fact that we get our first appearance of, well, we can trust the instruments, because obviously you're in a basically tin can without windows. You're not going to be able to see like, oh, there's no sub out there. You're trusting, like, radar has been around since World War II. You're trusting, like I said, beep sonar, not radar, but the idea of that has been around since World War II. You trust your instruments because that's how you're taught. And honestly, you're in a damn tin can that can't see anything, so you have that or nothing. So to have basically be completely betrayed by the things that you trust, I mean, that is, and it costing them their life. And the way that they all float up afterwards it's very, like, it hits you. It's just like, holy shit, you don't think about people dying under the ice, and like, can you imagine some poor like ice fisherman like going there and drills his hole and he puts his thing down and then he's like, hey, I caught a fish. And all of a sudden he pulls up some guy's head. Like, oh, Titanic. Shit.
Yeah, it's funny to think about. I'm assuming that whoever's involved, like the Russian, somehow these people have to be found. I think they're under the ice for like 6 months or something like that.
Yeah, they find them in the spring or something like that.
Yeah. So the crux of this movie, the true MacGuffin is the AI, but the MacGuffin for this movie is the key, which looks like a cross of some sort, but it's a failsafe key. It has two parts and they connect. And I love the little blinking lights on it. But the submarine has crashed, and it leads into the first part that kind of started irking me a little bit is, so we're doing another. Ilsa Faust has a bounty on her head of $50 million, basically shoot to kill type of scenario. She has one piece of the key that why it's important is not of our concern at this moment. But this is what the third film where Ilsa Faust is now put herself into a dangerous situation. She's now hidden in the sands of, I think, the Mojave Desert or
Abu
something like that.
She's outside of Abu Dhabi. Like, she's in Yemen.
Is she?
I think, yeah.
Okay. The Namib Desert. Namib Desert in South Africa.
Oh, sorry. Nairobi.
No, it's fine. I couldn't remember either. But the point I'm making is, like, so we're doing this again with Ilsa. She's now a wanted fugitive again. I'm like, it's a really cool. I'm gonna admit it's a really cool action sequence, really fun gunplay in the desert. I love how he's like petting the horse to keep the horse calm on the ground, because that horse is like freaking out. The horse is like, I'm gonna kill you, Ethan Hunt. Let's ride.
But don't you think to some extent, with Elsa, I mean, and since she was introduced as a character, she's always kind of been kind of the female version of Ethan Hunt. They're very similar in their approach.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
But hear me out. Like, you have Ethan kind of finding grounding and kind of, not like, he takes risks, but he doesn't take risks just to take risks. He doesn't jump back, if he's jumped off of the damn Burj Khalifa, he's not gonna jump off the Burj Khalifa again if he doesn't have to. But she kind of keeps going back to doing that because it's all she knows.
I guess that's true. It feels like to me personally, it feels like a storytelling trope that they needed something for Rebecca Ferguson to do in this movie because
I could see that.
I don't want to talk about it just yet, but there's something they do with her character in this movie that completely makes me realize why she's even in this movie. And it's a storytelling trope, which is one of those things where it's like if you watch TV, you know what I'm talking about. This is one of those things where I think this movie is more about the story than it is setting up around the set pieces, to be fairly honest. But this is that not that scene, because basically what it is Ethan Hunt has to go retrieve a key for Kittredge and the CIA. Which another thing is, like, I'm surprised that how Kittredge is still the director of CIA. I didn't realize the whole sequence is awesome. Like it's all sand. It's all sand. Like Ethan Hunt's like shooting down fools left and right. Ilsa has the eye patch which she uses to shoot the sniper rifle or the rifle to help Ethan. Like all that's cool. And there's like a misdirect where she's on the ground dead or whatever, and before it goes into the other stuff. But it's just like, at first I'm like, cool, maybe we'll see a lot of Rebecca Ferguson, but it's really just a setup of like trying to get the key and to get us back to Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa Faust character. But it almost doesn't feel like it was needed in this movie. It almost feels like just a way to introduce us back to. I don't know. I have problems with stuff like this because it feels like it's not needed for this movie. It feels like it's just another thing added to a film to pad the running time. I mean, I don't know. It's a really cool action sequence. I'm sure it looks cool in IMAX, but
Oh, it
I don't
does.
know.
But
I'm
that
very
does.
conflicted with. Yeah, I'm sure you, like you
No,
said,
I
you
think
saw it,
that's
but
fair.
yeah, there's some things in this movie where I'm like, did you really need to have this in that movie, or did you really need to have that in this movie? And this is one of those scenes like, I don't know. It's hard to really kind of root for something like that. It's one of the reasons it's a little lower on my list. It's such a cool action sequence, but it's just like, I don't know. There's something like it almost feels like you could have a scene at the beginning. I don't know. I'm really conflicted by this scene in
No, I
general. I
think
don't
that's
know.
fair. And I can see where you're coming from. I guess in the moment and with any of these, and I'm not trying to make excuses because the story is still an important thing across the board, regardless of if you don't have a decent story, what the hell are you even doing? They even said, so they did the whole. I saw an advanced screening of this, and they said at one point they had a little kind of behind the scenes, and they were
Yeah.
talking about how, oh well, we didn't have a set piece for Abu Dhabi, but then we decided to add it when we found out it is definitely a movie built around cool effects. It's jumping from one really awesome thing to the next, and of these movies, it's certainly the one that does it the most. I guess I got so
Yeah.
caught up in the action part of it that the story, and you're right, looking back at with Elsa, it definitely, her character is underused here. There are
Well,
bits that
yeah.
it's, but to some extent her character has always kind of flitted in and out of these stories. She's never been like there the entire time, really.
Well, but the funny thing about it was, I mean, the use of Michelle Monaghan's character in Fallout, I think, was perfect because this character kind of disappeared, and you're like wondering what happened to her, and she comes back, and it's like, I think the setup was nice. I think it was a justification, but it's just weird to have this whole sequence in there. It's not even the worst part that I have problems with. It's very weird because it goes from the sandstorm to him wanting to retrieve the key, which, like I said, the action sequence stuff is great. To introduce, this is another problem with this movie. There's too many characters, but it introduces us to the head of the CIA, the head of, I think, Carrie. One thing I love Carrie Elwes finally in a big budget action movie, even though I have major problems with this character. But I think he's like the director of defense or something like that, the secretary of defense or something like that. And it introduces us to these characters, which maybe they're gonna have a bigger role in the second part. This is
Well, he
another
dies.
thing where,
He You're
well,
talking
no, no,
about
no, no,
the.
no. Well, no, no, no. That's not what I'm talking about. The thing I'm talking about is you have this whole big sequence where they're discussing the entity and the idea of like what it's capable of and what it could do, and the fact that they discuss the IMF, and they discuss like kind of the obscene of insane nature of the IMF and stuff like that, and it introduced us to characters played by well-known actors and actresses like Charles Parnell, Rob Delaney, Indira Varma, Mark Gatiss. They're characters that never show up again in this movie after this scene, and I'm wondering if they're going to show up at the end of, like, or they're going to show up at some part two. This also introduced Dillinger, who of course is played by Carrie Elwes. It reintroduces us to Kittredge, who's played by Henry Czerny. This is going to be a thing that I have a major problem with because Henry Czerny, I think, is perfectly fine for this movie, bringing him back as the director of CIA. Carrie Elwes as Dillinger is one of my huge problems with this movie. His character is not needed in this movie. There's no sense and no rhyme. It feels like it's a padding out of the movie. It's one of the most infuriating tropes to add a character to this movie, just to have him used as one particular idea. And I think there could have been some really interesting stuff to use with Dillinger's character, but there's nothing there as a character. And it's really frustrating to see. And Henry's you could literally put all these characters that we see into Henry Czerny's character and just had him be the Dillinger character. I'm not saying what happens at the end. I'm just saying have him be that character because there's no reason for any of these characters, and we'll talk about some other characters. There's no reason or rhyme or reason for them to be even in this movie because this movie is it's so interconnecting with different parts of different things that it needs to do that it almost falls by the wayside and becomes incoherent with some of these characters. And I hate when they do this kind of stuff, and I hate when they add characters that are not needed. They're unnecessary, they're not needlessly needed, and that's what happens in this movie. And it's really infuriating and really problematic, and I think it ruins, it kind of wastes the talent of the actor.
I can't say that I minded his character. It's just like, oh, okay, there's a guy doing the thing. He was there and gone. And I understand your point. I do. But I guess it wasn't up there for very long. It didn't really bug me that much.
Well, but the main problem is, I get that, but if it had been like nameless actor and then it was just been that one scene, it had been not Carrie Elwes, and they had done what they did with him, I think I would have been all right with that because this scene is very important. So not only the introduction of like how IMF is used, what they need, all that stuff. We have this like really cool scene where they have this like big hall of like analog typewriters, which I thought was a really cool thing. And
the place was
we have
massive.
Right, but I just love that it's like all analog. It's not actually like technology. It's all like analog typewriter. So you hear just a bunch of clicking go, and there's like thousands of them typing. And we have this guy that's introduced who comes into the room, and I like all this stuff it's a good setup. It's a good thing, but like I said, you don't need these big actors like Rob Delaney or Indira Varma or Carrie Elwes. You could have like unnamed actors as these roles, or you could have these actors.
I was gonna say, isn't that kind of the fun of it? Is having because look at any cameo, and regarded, not all cameos are created equal by any stretch. But isn't that the point of those kind of things? Like, hey, friend of actor,
true.
Yeah,
I mean that's true, and like they do it with like Cillian Murphy in the Batman series and stuff like that. I'm just saying, like, what they do with Carrie Elwes' character, if he had just been in this one scene and maybe showed up in like the second movie or something like that, or showed up like Kittredge does, or not Kittredge, like Alec Baldwin does, like in the first Rogue Nation, I guess that would have been fine. And there's actually a picture of Angela Bassett in the background. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did. That was cool.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny. So it was a nice little callback,
But okay, isn't that on
but it was the same
level?
time. It was the same problem I had with Angela Bassett. It's like they don't even use her very well in that movie, and they don't use Carrie Elwes very well in this movie. And
I don't disagree. But isn't this like giving Mace Windu a purple lightsaber? Like it's that thing to go, oh my god, look, there's a random guy with the thing, and I know that Samuel L. Jackson had a bigger role, but I just mean that like sometimes it's just about, hey, these people have been very supportive, or hey, I really love what you do. Come over and do this thing. And I'm not saying that that's a good reason to pick anybody for a role, but how many times does that happen in any place or time? Maybe Carrie Hughes wanted to play just that kind of nasty, terrible, awful person,
Well, no, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it didn't need to be in this film. Like it has nothing to this. There's no purpose to Carrie Elwes' character outside of being the CIA, or I mean the Secretary of Defense, or whatever he is in this movie, National Security Director, or whatever. Henry Czerny's the character that you need, or I mean, you don't necessarily need Henry Czerny's character. I'm just saying, if you're going to use Kittredge, his character actually has some real relevance and importance to the stakes of this film. So if it had been just a scene where, you know, it was Kittredge in his office or something like that, and like he's talking to like Carrie Elwes on a video screen or something like that, or like this scene in general, I think that's fine. But if they had used Carrie Elwes in a much stronger way, I think that would have been more justifiable than having him in the performance that he has, because the left field turn that they ends up coming up with Carrie Elwes' character, it doesn't make any sense. It's one of those things where it feels like Christopher McQuarrie and his co-writer just wanted to find some little piece that have connection points to, you know, the twist of like the other movies, and I just don't think that was. I think you already have a twist with Kittredge's character that it just like it's. But like I said, when you get to this point, this whole scene is to get Kittredge and Ethan Hunt together in a scene that's reminiscent from the fish tank sequence in the first movie,
Okay.
because it's shot very much like that. And
Oh
I
yeah.
love I love the scene where it actually mirrors. You know, have you ever seen me upset? That type of thing. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm not upset. I'm here. I'm listening. And I this is where the whole thing about, you know, Kittredge talks about the technology, about, you know, the idea of like the irrelevancy of the IMF, about, you know, how, you know, everything's going to cost Hunt dearly, how all this stuff is basically a precursor, a setup to this mission is going to be something that's going to cost you, is going to affect you, is going to be something that will possibly end everything that you know in your existence. And I love that. I love this scene because it allows us the introduction. It shows that even though Henry Czerny hasn't been in it since the first film, there is a mutual understanding and mutual. They know each other. They've been around each other for many, many years, decades at this point. They don't like each other, but they get along with each other. And at this point, you know, it's like his point man in a lot of
Yeah.
respects.
No, absolutely. With Dillinger, you forget that there's also a part two.
Well, yeah, I mean, but well,
No, I understand. I understand where you're going, but I think that what happens at the end of this, not to say that they're not, for all of the stuff, I do think that they're making statements on certain things. You know, like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, kind of, between Dillinger and no, not Dillinger,
yeah,
Dellinger,
yeah, yeah,
Dellinger,
Dillinger, yeah,
and such.
Kittredge.
I think that there is something more there that, you know, being that they were both places and such, I think that that does play into the fact that even though they're both kind of on the same side, they're not really on the same side. Like it shows that depth of, oh my god, what's going on, kind of a thing. But it is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
well-worn,
that's fine,
but it is a well-worn trope that this didn't need. I'll agree with you
right?
there.
I like I said, I love that Ethan Hunt comes in with the mask, and then he leaves with another mask with Kittredge's mask and shoots Kittredge with an arrow, stuff like that. I love the smoke bomb. That it only
Yeah.
lasts for a few seconds, but it knocks out everyone. I just love that they have a technology that they introduce in every movie that is like a
Mm-hmm.
really cool piece of technology that they
Oh
use
yeah.
many times. But I like I said, the whole point purpose of this whole sequence is to get Ethan Hunt on his way and to know that people are going to be after him, and you know, the technology in the world. And it is very, very true. And Kittredge brings it up about how the next war will be a ballistic war. It will be, you know, a war for air, a war for water, a war for whatever. And it's very true
Spam.
because you
War
yeah,
for
spam.
spam.
Yeah. We are introduced once again. They love Abu Dhabi in this franchise. Apparently, it's been in like 3 films now. I think it was in it was like in the one of the 2 films or something like that. Because Kisher says, "I can't protect you. You're going rogue. You're on your own." They've sent out a recon team, not recon team, a enforcement team to bring back Ethan, which is fine. It's acceptable, I guess. But we're introduced to Shea Wiggum and Greg Tarzan Davis, who play major characters in this movie. And I love Shea Wiggum, who's in Boardwalk Empire. He's a good actor. Greg Tarzan Davis, he's been around, but he hasn't done a lot of stuff. You have these 2 characters in this movie, and we'll kind of get into it, who are Kittredge character or the Alec Baldwin character. They're the characters that pop up in every area of this movie, and they are the most useless characters in this entire film. And they are fun in the Abu Dhabi airport, but they should have disappeared after that. They are not needed in this film. They waste the minutes and screen time of this film. And as much as I love these two actors, I feel bad for them because you see it. There are scenes that are devoted just to these two actors, and we'll talk about the different scenes that they're in. I don't understand why this is a Carrie Elwes situation. Why are these people in this movie? They add nothing to this movie whatsoever. The scenes that they're in they're just in the scenes, like the car chase sequence. They're just there, or the party sequence, or the Brave sequence, or the train sequence, which they have a whole scene devoted to them. I gotta ask you, Trip, maybe you don't have a problem with this, but I have a huge problem with these two people being in this effing movie. It's so infuriating because they deserve better. They don't need to be in this movie. They add unnecessarily runtime to two characters that are just there to chase after Ethan Hunt, and they add nothing to this movie. They could have been taken out. They could have been out and not led to any part. They're the Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they had, they could have been taken out and the movie would not have been any different. I'm not, but you know what I mean.
No, I understand. I can't say I disagree with you, but, and again, this is why I am a terrible movie reviewer, genuinely, and I don't mean that in a rude way. I just,
well, you love terrible movies, so
I do. I think I probably give a pass to more than I should. I genuinely didn't. I will agree that in the grand scheme of everything, they were not needed, but I do think that they added a certain, like, we're kind of with them, like, we're viewing it like we're kind of their kind of audience to some extent, if that makes sense. And there is a way that they push Ethan along to the next thing. Now, were there other things that could have done that? Absolutely. I didn't have an issue with them, and I know, I guess they're periphery characters, and they didn't bug me. And again, like I say, I don't, because of that point, I'm a terrible reviewer in that respect. I admit this 100%. No, I am. I 100% am.
Triv, you got to realize something. I'm so critical of stuff that I love that people kind of wonder if I love things, and it's because this movie is so focused on Ethan Hunt trying to find this key and the bad guys and stuff like that, that when you add in characters that are not necessary or needed for a film, it almost feels like that at this point, because Chris McQuarrie and Tom Cruise have been working together for so long, that nobody's going to question whether they need to edit stuff out. And I know what you're saying about how it pushes Ethan Hunt to the next scene, but do you really think, outside of the Abu Dhabi airport stuff, that these two characters have any effect on Ethan Hunt at all in the movie? Like, they don't really. I mean, they're there. He knows that they're there, but they're in the car chase sequence. They don't really add anything. They're part of they're part of the main crew of people chasing after him. The stuff in the rave scene, they kind of chase after him a little bit, but he really didn't need them to chase after him because he's already on his merry way to find Ilsa and Grace. But it just, when you have stuff like this, and it's not the first movie to do this kind of stuff where you add characters that are not needed.
It's pretty common.
These movies have been so focused on, like, not bringing in characters, but having characters go from movie to movie to movie, that it feels like you're just adding fluff when there doesn't need to be fluff there. And I found these two characters, I found them so, like, I don't know.
I get it. I guess here's what I come back to, and I got a couple things. The first thing is, it's nice to see IMF agents that are outside of, like, the secretary or, like, the head bitch in charge types. Like, you've got guys that are on the ground, they know the ins and outs of this.
But these aren't IMF agents, though.
Aren't they? What are they?
No, they're called the community. No, they're not IMF agents. They're like a task force.
Oh, okay. I assume that they're
like people that are like like Navy SEALs or.
Oh, okay. I assume that they were.
As far as I know, they're not IMF agents. They're more like tactical recon, not tactical extract. No, they're like the guys that Ilsa Faust, is being chased after. They're those people
Right.
that are brought in to do special. It's like the Blonsky character in the Incredible Hulk. They're brought in to do secret ops missions
Kind of
to
like
take down a target.
independent contractor merc types.
Yeah, they could be working for the military, but they could be like independent contractors. But they have the full power behind them. They're like the guys that are going
Okay.
after. Yeah. So
See, I
just
assumed that they were IMF just based on the fact that they didn't answer to Kittredge, but they kind of answered to Kittredge, and the fact that they were kind of
yeah.
aware of the tech that was at least sort of being used. But no, I like I say, I guess I know it could have been cut down more. That's obvious. That's a lot of movies, but I do think this movie did not slack to me. It was constantly moving. I didn't
Well,
feel like
no, yeah.
I just mean generally. And I know I get when you get those characters that stand out, they do become a focal point. Whether you mean them to or not, they do become a focal point. But I do appreciate the fact that they were able to stick with Ethan, and I do think that that will come back in part 2. Like whether Ethan needs backup on the fact that they were witnessing the fact that he's not someone that, what he does is for the greater good. He puts his team first. All of those things. I have a sense that that's probably going to come back into play. And that's a hard thing to tell. That is the one thing that's hard to tell about a 2-part movie where we have like largely resolution for the first half. Like we don't know what's coming next. It could turn into a thing where it's like, Return or Rise of or the Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. There could be absolutely no connections between the two movies other than the people that are starring in it. It could be a great second half. My sense is that it's probably going to be a good second half because they know what the hell they're doing. But that doesn't rely the fact that we have had many characters that in theory could have been left out. I don't know. I guess, like I say, they didn't bug me. They were kind of like a Guildenstern and the other guy from oh god, I'm drawing a blank on the names. Shakespeare. Like there's Guildenstern and whatever his name is. They're not comedic characters, but they're there to kind of comment on what's going on, sort of.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe they get used more. I don't know. I just feel like that it's weird. It's hard to really explain.
I don't disagree with you. I think that they definitely could have been left out. And I think, like you said with Indiana Jones, honestly, anyone could have done what Indiana Jones did. Like he was, for as being the main character as he is, he could have been wiped off from those movies and the same things would have happened in the grand scheme.
Yeah. I mean,
so take it how you will.
Right. And basically their task is to bring in Ethan Hunt. They say don't discredit or discount what Ethan Hunt's capable of, because as we've seen, Ethan Hunt's very capable of, the impossible, I guess. This whole scene is they need to retrieve the key, the second half of the key from a buyer. And there's a great scene that I've joked about before about, why is there two tech guys in this movie between Luther and Benji, and they make a joke about it in the movie. And that's when you were talking about the one thing where Benji calls Luther's, I can't remember what word he calls him.
He calls him Phineas Freak.
Oh yeah. But I love the fact that he's like, one of them says to Ethan is like, there's nothing wrong about having two techs in here or something like that, or like, and they start making fun of each other from the tech point of view. But I love that both individuals have like a purpose for their role. Like, for instance, Luther can manipulate objects on the screen of a computer of the, to fool these individuals that Shea Wiggum and Greg Davis play. And I love everything about that. I think it's a little weird to have a nuclear bomb situation play out in this scene, but I don't know, whatever. It is what it is, but it gives Simon Pegg a fun little action scene to kind of play out.
It is, the entity is playing on, worst case scenario type of stuff.
And it's also a way for us introduced to the main villain, and the idea of how this villain seems to be one step ahead. And we'll talk about the what's his name?
Gabriel.
His name's Gabriel, but he's played by the best. I think it was the best friend or the brother of Lou Diamond Phillips and La Bamba,
Really? Oh, that's awesome.
S.I. Morales.
Oh, cool.
And I think he's been in other stuff before. He's a pretty well-known actor, but
Hmm.
basically Ethan Hunt, they have like really cool tech. They have a Geiger meter. They also have a pair of glasses which can find the key and also can bring him up. It's basically like it's like the all
Like the
around
Deus Ex
glasses that,
Machina.
yeah, it can do anything
Or Deus Ex
basically.
Machina. Deus Ex Machina.
Right.
For God's sake.
You know, as he's trying to avoid the community, as they're called, the secret agents or whatever, Ethan comes across a pickpocketer named Grace, who's played by Haley Atwell. Grace's character is an individual that can be played as a stereotype, but I don't know how you feel about this, but I think Haley Atwell is the best thing to come in the franchise, maybe more than Rebecca Ferguson's character.
I would agree. I think she's more. She feels. I don't know. She feels more dynamic, and I don't know. And not to say we haven't had a lot of Rebecca Ferguson's character, and she hasn't been fantastic, but just generally, like, she seems to. I think Rebecca Ferguson had the potential to match wits quite a lot with Ethan Hunt, but I get the sense that it seems like Haley Atwell, like, actually matches wits with him more.
Yeah,
Like,
and
they
she
kind of
like
go
is
back and
constantly
forth, and yeah.
right. They use her smartly in the fact that she just constantly outwits Ethan's character, which
Oh
is
yeah.
great because, you know, she comes across as this very wet behind the ears thief that's stealing this key for whatever reasons. The idea of like, you know, the only correspondence are through electronic email, which brings it to a very interesting thing down the road. But I kind of love her character and what they do with her. And I think she actually may be one of the best characters introduced since Benji, his character in the third
Yeah.
movie, because I think Haley Atwell is an actress that is very likable, very personable, and she's just a lot of fun. I mean, she was great as Peggy Carter in the MCU. I think she's very talented, and this is a great addition because she just what they do with her in this movie, they make her very vulnerable, but they make her very smart. They make her very like strong-willed, but they also she's not perfect. She makes mistakes, and I love that about her. I love, you know, the things they do with her. There's some of the best moments in this movie are between Ethan and Grace's character. And once again, I think Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa character is great. I think she was fantastic in Rogue Nation and for the most part Fallout, but I think they didn't know really much what else to do with her Ilsa's character.
I think you're
And I
right.
think
I
that's the main
do.
problem.
Right. I do think you agree, because they do repeat, and I know what I said before was, I do still think that she's kind of like she is Ethan if Ethan didn't have that restraint to learn from his stuff, because they even say,
Yeah,
she keeps falling into the same trap over and over and over, and to be stuck
right.
in that cycle is what I think Ethan was for a while in a few of those movies. But it was
Yeah,
that growing and maturing that made him a little bit more, and finding people to ground him. And not to say that
right.
she wasn't part of that, but I don't think she felt as much part of that. So
And like all this stuff in the Abu Dhabi airport, just with her and Ethan trying to evade the group of individuals, and then him seeing kind of a shadow, a figure of his Isai Morales' Gabriel character, and the nuclear bomb stuff, and just the nature of that this mission doesn't go right, everything goes wrong. I just love everything about it because it's very Mission Impossible, but it's also a way for characters to be introduced, a way for the MacGuffin to be kind of put into play. I don't know. I love that this kind of how it starts to unfold, how it starts to play out, and I just love everything about it. It's one of the most interesting moments in this film because once again, the last two films have kind of just jumped into the action, and I love the fact that, you know, we don't get a scene of Benji and Luther and Ethan like meeting at the airport. They're just already talking. What makes that great is it just shows you that we've already been in this world, we've already been introduced to these characters. They're just there. You're basically jumping back into their story. You don't need any
right.
introductions. You don't need, you know, Peter Parker getting bit by Spider-Man, Superman coming to Earth. They're just there, and they just go straight into talking about, Simon Pegg's Benji characters goes, he starts going to diatribe about what this thing is. He's like, oh, it's just a typical Monday morning for us. And
Yeah.
I love the fact that it just jumps into it. There's no introduction. It's just like, we're here, we're running into it, we're going full steam ahead without,
Right.
you have to go with us. And it's a great way to introduce Luther and Benji and have their characters play out.
Yeah.
I love the nuclear bomb is like specifically towards Benji's character and stuff like that. And I love the questions that it gets asked, and I love the fact that it's like, who's the most important people in your life? He's like, I don't want to say it. Luther's just say it, damn it. He's like, my friends. He's like, oh, I can't believe I said it. It's just like,
well, and two, I mean, this certainly isn't the first time that we jump into the action. I mean, when we first meet Elsa, it is in the middle of the action. There's a lot of times that this happens throughout the series too.
But I like when everything goes haywire. I love the fact that they have an out plan. Ethan's like, just go. Eventually, you'll find me. We'll find each other. We just abort this mission. I like the fact that Grace escapes through the door. All that stuff. It's kind of great. I love the fact that it just is. It shows you that as perfect as you can make everything, not everything's going to be perfect. And sometimes it fails. So,
and we don't get a lot of those kind of missions either, where things go so badly so quickly.
Yeah, it's pretty great stuff. I mean, it's Ethan. I do love when Shay and Greg they're looking like, where's Ethan at? You can see him running across the across the window in the airport because he's on the roof.
And the whole thing that's awesome. And where I know it's a very comedic moment, and it's probably a little too over the top for what this is, but I relished it because it was pretty funny. Like, they're trying to track down like Ethan in the airport, and they go up to the guy that they think is him, and they start like pulling on people's faces and stuff, trying to. God, that was hilarious. Also, the Abu Dhabi airport is freaking amazing. It looks like sand going across, and that's so cool. I love it.
Yeah, their opulence over there is
oh my God.
As Richard Kiley once said, spare no expense. Or
exactly.
Hammond or whatever, Jurassic Park.
Hell yeah.
It all leads to Rome. The one thing I love about movies that go international is they show us that even though America's beautiful, like the old school, very, very old looking world that is Rome or Paris or Venice or whatever, it's just, there's something like awe-inspiring to watch these cities and watch how they use these cities, because you could have like the fact that they were probably able to close down the streets near the Colosseum. You can have like all these like wide shots and stuff like that. But what this movie does and what the franchise has done is it allows us to get up close and personal with these cities. And this scene's all about how do we get Ethan Hunt and Grace cuffed together. And I love the fact that Grace she thinks she's gotten away, but she's gotten arrested because she, as most people do if they're wanted by corporation or the FBI, the governments, like she has all these passports. They've arrested her. They got arrested her right off the plane. I love the fact that there's like a little bit of realism there, that like that would probably happen if a fugitive got on the plane. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, absolutely. I mean, it was kind of a foregone conclusion that that's how she was going to end up. They had her on security, like getting onto the plane. She was wanted by like 15 or 20 different people. So the chances
the guy names off
making...
all the things that he's like, oh, this is my favorite. Resisting arrest or punching a person in the face or something like that.
Yeah.
And she opens up the passport and removes the clip, that moves the paper clip. And I love, oh, that's a nice likeness of me. And I just like, that's the kind of stuff, like, it shows you Haley Atwell is just so much fun in this movie as Grace.
Well, and she plays the kind of, oh, but I'm just a teacher here on, sabbatical and all that stuff. They do a good job with that. So
yeah, and I love the fact that because Ethan Hunt knows where she's going and he's as good as he is, they're like, oh, your lawyer's here. She's like, my lawyer? She's like looking around. She realizes she sees the Geiger meter thing that looks like a cigarette lighter. And I think one of the biggest laughs outside of the car chase sequences, Ethan Hunt comes out in glasses in a book.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty funny. Yeah.
He spends so much time in a suit and yet it never gets wrinkled.
It's because they're non-wrinkly suits, true. You know
I
this.
guess so, yeah. Or those IMF gadgets are fantastic.
Right, right. No, they can't get the face tech to work, but they can keep their suits from wrinkly.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean that's
Uh,
basic. That's 101, you know.
But yeah, yeah, like the whole purpose of this sequence
The whole
is
porpoise, the whole dolphin
yeah,
sequence.
right. Gabriel, who's been kind of in the shadows. I love to see he's like, oh, I'm part of Interpol. And the guy's like, what? And he knows about his family, but he's like, I've been looking for this key. It might look like a pendant on a chain on a necklace, like your wife or something like that. And it just Gabriel comes off as one of those like villains that is fun to watch. And just like the nature of like how he feels like disconnected with the world, but he feels like all omnipotent, which makes me
Oh
wonder
yeah.
like if he has like some implant chip in his brain of the entity or how the funny thing is like the entity. I don't know if it's worried about Ethan Hunt, like in the sense of like using Gabriel, who has a history with Ethan's character. Was there's like this computations of like Doctor Strange where it saw all these many times of like Ethan Hunt coming after him, so you use Gabriel because it is a little weird that Gabriel is the main villain of this movie and has a history with Ethan, like a big history with Ethan. And I don't know how you feel about that because he kind of comes into the mix until what scene? It's like I can't remember what scene where the rave scene where he becomes like his like whole plan becomes truly important. But you see him in flashbacks and stuff like that, and you see that Ethan remembers seeing him, having him so closely connected and being the most closely connected since Jim Phillips. Like, how do you feel about Gabriel's character being the villain and being so closely connected to Ethan Hunt?
I don't know. I guess I liked him as a villain. I thought he did a great job. Like he plays that kind of he has notes to give type of guy to some extent. And obviously it's not going to go in a sci-fi direction because that would be really weird. But he's like that devotee of like complete and utter chaos. It's going to like merge his soul with the entity and like be taken over or be possessed by like the powers that be,
A
you know,
lawnmower man.
like gonna go that or Hellraiser or something like that. Like that's just the sense that I get off of it. Like it's more sci-fi level obsession than it is anything else. I would imagine that being that Ethan has everywhere that Ethan goes, even if you don't know his name, you understand the ins and outs of the kind of person that he is and the ripples that he leaves in every single pond that he runs across. So, to some extent, I think that that's probably, you know, he ran in these circles of people. And I think that with someone of what seems to be Gabriel's caliber, you're gonna clash with that kind of a thing. It's like you could have world
Well,
leaders on completely different sides of the world, and ultimately
yeah.
those two world leaders are going to clash because that is just like it's a movable force meets impenetrable object kind of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but like, did it seem odd to you at all that Gabriel happens to be the main villain? I mean, he's had people in his past that have been villains and stuff like that, but it's like someone so closely related to how Ethan became in the IMF. I think he's a great villain, but I don't know if they really needed to have him as the main villain in this movie.
I think he was
There's
fine
got once
as
again. Maybe the second movie will give more explanation, but it feels like maybe you're adding too many tropes and characters into one character, and you're trying to maybe make it too easy for the audience to have this character be kind of connected. It's one of those things where it's just like, I guess,
I mean,
okay.
to some extent, okay. So with things like this, if they wanted to make it a story for Ethan, like a personal story for him, where he kind of confronts what he was, I think you almost have to have something that comes to that. Now, if Gabriel makes sense or not in that role, I don't think you can think too deep on it. I think you do need to keep a certain level of just repeat to yourself it's a movie, you know, kind of a deal. Like there's going to be those things and Mission Impossible is always they either played it too complex in the first one, way too simple in the second one, and then they kind of found that middle ground. And I think that
Well,
that's
I
just
mean,
kind
you
of
can have. I guess you can have a character that knows Ethan, especially this guy could know a lot about Ethan for having the AI technology help him and stuff like that. But like the third movie with Philip Seymour Hoffman, which I'm pretty sure you probably agree is still probably the best villain in the series.
oh,
He knows
definitely.
who Ethan is, but he knows him because he's an arms dealer. He's a dealer of so he has people he's connected to that will know, but he doesn't have a personal connection. Ethan Hunt's character here, this guy has a personal connection to Ethan Hunt's character, but also is the main crux and main story villain. So I don't know. It's just it's weird to me. Like the AI technology would use this one happen to use this one guy as the main villain for the story. But I think what Esai Morales does in this movie is absolutely fantastic. I think
Oh
he's,
yeah.
to me personally, probably one of the. I think he's actually the second best villain in this series. That's just me personally. I think he's better than like Jim Phillips and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I just think it's a little weird that they would use him as the main villain for this film when they could have been anybody. I don't. I don't know. It's really weird.
Do you think though, like, because they kind of talk about the algorithms and the probabilities and all that kind of stuff with the set of skills and the kind of person that Ethan Hunt is. I mean, that's that could very well be why the entity brought Gabriel in close, was because the entity ran the probabilities and saw this. I mean, that's kind of what
Yeah,
it
I
seemed
mean,
like when, like, at the rave they kind of talked a little bit about that. So I always kind of just thought it was like those
well, I mean, it
probabilities
could
came
be.
up, plus Moth to Flame. Like, in any story like this, you're gonna have that drastic showdown between, like, people of the past, like, because
Right.
he
It could
needs
be
to
also
confront his past, right? I mean, that's kind of what it
right.
comes to.
And it could be also one of those things where we learn in the second movie about how Gabriel came to be. Like maybe there's something that the entity saw, something Gabriel was doing, and like like the it just kind of recognized Gabriel as somebody who could be used. I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see if they actually. I'm hoping that they do some kind of full explanation of why Gabriel is the main villain,
I
because
would
like
imagine they'll
here,
say something.
well, not necessarily. I've known them to do in the
I
past where
mean,
they leave
they
stuff
may not
out.
give like 100% full explanation, but they normally give some kind of input of, okay, you were my father's brother's first cousin's former roommate. Prepare to die.
Well, the other thing that I found interesting, I don't know if you noticed this, but when we see Grace, because Grace's name is not, she's not really Grace, she's actually somebody else. But I thought it was really fascinating that when she opens up her passport, she covers her name, or the guy covers the name, or whoever covers her name. So I'm starting to wonder if Grace is connected to Ethan Hunt's past. Like
See, and
he
I
talks
was
about,
one. So I
because he
was
knows she's an
wondering if,
orphan.
yeah. See, I was wondering if I don't think the age works where she was actually the one who was, quote, shot. But yeah, there's obviously
Yeah, that's
something
what I was
more than
thinking.
just, yeah. And I didn't know if because obviously, 30 years in the past or whatever it might be, she's
Yeah,
not
I mean, you gotta
she's
remember
not
this is
that
like,
young. So,
yeah, how old is Haley Atwell? Oh, she's 41. I mean, they could play Haley Atwell as younger, but like I said, the fact that they cover her name, there's a possibility that there's some connection, that either she's connected to someone like whoever she could be connected to. But it makes me wonder if Haley Atwell's character is connected to Ethan's past through that death, like she lost her mother. And I like I said, that would be very much a convenience plotting point if that were true. But the fact that she's hidden her name is kind of like when they did Beatrix Kiddo from Kill Bill.
right.
Like there's a reason they hid the name and stuff like that. So I don't know. It was really, it was something I noticed was the second time watching it that they did that. So there's got to be some reason why we don't know her actual name or something like that.
Yeah, it's more than just like, Ethan being called John Lark. It's more than just a spy cover name. There's clearly
Yeah,
more
yeah,
to it
yeah,
than that.
yeah. And we'll see. Maybe she's the daughter of what's his face, the one who got impaled by the spikes
Yeah,
in the.
Emilio Estevez.
Yeah. But of course, this all leads to a great sequence. You
Oh my god, I
know,
love this sequence.
yeah, it basically she steals a police vehicle because she escapes by crying wolf and stuff like that. And then of course Ethan Hunt steals a police motorcycle. And I love that she like keeps hitting everything. She's like, why is everybody parked like this? Why is she like knocks over tables, and she like knocks over cars? And the one character I haven't introduced yet is Palm Clementif, who of course is from Guardians. She plays Paris. I love Paris as she's not like what you would call like important to the story, but she's a great sidekick villain to Gabriel's
Oh,
character.
she's so fun.
Yeah, you could tell Palm's having a lot of fun in this movie, just the nature of what she's doing. She's basically there as a bodyguard, but she's also kind of like that bodyguard that has more to her. She's more of like a strongman in a lot of respects. But I love that Ethan's trying to help Grace's character, and she ends up colliding with was it Palm's vehicle. And,
And
and
she's
it's
got
like
like a giant ass like Humvee thing.
but I love the simple fact that they're trying to open the doors and they can't get the doors open, so and then they have the sequence where Grace is looking out the window and you just see the motorcycle flying towards the bad guys, just like
So good.
it knocks her. Yeah, and then Ethan comes up and punches her, the one guy in the face, and throws him through the window, and it just stuff like that. And then the fact that they have to find a way to escape. They're actually right near the Coliseum, apparently, from what I gather, the location, which makes a lot of sense. Like they would have that scene right next to a major, a major landmark and stuff like that. But I mean, this is all about the character development of Grace and Ethan as two individuals. And I love the fact that they play off each other very well. They're like, he handcuffs her to him, and they steal the car. And what's great is like he cuffed her on the wrong hand side, so she has to drive it first, or they would have to like switch hands, and so they would have to do like this. I don't know. I find that funny. I find it funny. Like,
Oh, it's a
she's
great
driving, but
sequence.
she's
Absolutely
she's
great
terrible
sequence.
driver. She's like crashing at everything. She knocks off the doors. It's really good stuff, really funny, and they're being chased by every cop imaginable, and
It's downright
being
Blues
chased.
Brothers levels of destruction.
Yeah, it is, and like I said, you have the Shea Wiggum and Greg Davis character coming to the mix, and I'm like, whatever, I don't care about them, but I just love like they're being chased after the police, they're being chased after the two security guys, they're being chased after Palm Clementif and the RV, the Humvee, and she has like the smile on her face as she's driving, and it's just like this one big chase sequence. It's like everything imaginable happening in the city is, once again, like you said, small streets, small condensed areas.
Oh man.
They're trying,
And it gets
yeah.
smaller and smaller and smaller.
I like when they crash into the bikes. He's like, nope, I'm not doing this anymore. You're driving. And apparently this is a sequence that, Tom Cruise really did. They put a rig onto the car, and they let Tom Cruise drive with Haley Atwell, or maybe she has a stunt double, where they are literally connected like this. He's driving, like she's over here, he's over here trying to, or no, it's like this where he's driving with like his left hand, while they're like she's on the passenger side, so like he's having to drive while she shifts gears or whatever. And I think it's one of those impressive action sequences that if you sit down and watch the behind the scenes, you're like, Tom Cruise is a madman. Like the stuff they're doing, the fact that he's willing to drive in this really uncomfortable position, it's really impressive stuff.
In a very, like, Rome is not a simple city to drive in at the best of times. And yeah, even if the streets are closed down, there's so much to consider in that respect. I mean, and they were talking too on the the behind the scenes before the movie started about like a good chunk of the roads there are cobblestone, and you can't stop on cobblestone the way you stop on, say, asphalt. And so they're
Right.
sliding around, so there's a level of control that you lack on cobblestone, and how much that had to play into every single scene.
Yeah, and I mean, you could tell it was probably a very difficult scene, the sequence to shoot.
Oh yeah,
I love
and
the
so
fact
many
that
angles. Holy shit!
right. There's a lot of editing in this movie. Like a lot of, for instance, like they'll have Luther here in like one shot, and then they'll shift over to another shot, like an angled version, like a that camera, the whatever that thing is called when it's like sideways,
Dutch angle.
And they do that a lot here. They like, but it's never like over edited or whatever. It's
No,
kind of just perfectly done.
it's well
But
done.
they
It's
have
certainly not like a Paul Greengrass like Bourne movie.
yeah, but they finally have to ditch the car, and of course because IMF is IMF, they have things everywhere. They have boats, they have houses, they have cars, and so he like presses the phone, and they come across all these really nice cars. Nope, they get the one car that's a Fiat, this small
And the
tiny yellow
doors
Fiat.
keep opening up. Oh my god,
Yeah.
that was so funny. It was a reoccurring gag, but they didn't like. They just the doors open, shut it again. It was it was so funny. I love it.
Oh, it's great because like Tom Cruise has no idea how to get this car started. He presses the windshield wipers. He can't get the windshield wipers to shut off, and he
Well,
finally
that's
gets
just
his.
a
He
Fiat
finally
thing,
yeah, and like the engine, like it sounds like it has like a I don't know, a race car engine in it or something like that. It's like this insane like engine in a small Fiat. But it's like I don't think it was done on purpose, but it feels like an homage to Herbie, this car.
It could be.
Like
I mean,
yeah,
I actually got more like Italian job with the Mini Coopers than I got anything else because I don't think it was Rome that they were going through, but it was some it might have been Prague. I don't remember, but they did similar things with a set of 3 Mini Coopers.
right. Yeah, and I love that they're like, oh, we're gonna get this car, and then they end up being like photographs on the camera and being chased anyway. So it's like the point of the car was the
Oh
point of
yeah.
the car is to have like a silly action sequence because I like when they're being chased by everyone, and then they fall down the step. The car just rolls down the steps of what I don't know
The
what
Spanish
location.
steps. Yeah, it's
Oh, is
Spanish
that what it
steps.
is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so they're rolling down the Spanish steps, and when the car comes back to the right side, comes back in front, like they've reverted back to the Haley Atwell and Tom Cruise have like reverted back to she's now in the driver's seat, and I'm like, she's like, son of a bitch. I thought that was
That
funny,
was
but
amazing.
yeah,
And then the Palm or Paris is still chasing after them and like just kind of like crashes through the one kind of barricade down the steps right next to them, and they end up in this little piazza, and they're sitting there
uh,
or plaza kind of going in circles because they can't get traction.
yeah,
And it's
they're
just
doing like wheelies, they're doing like circles, and
oh no,
Palm's
the
just trying to start a
smoke, the
vehicle.
smoke. It's just the wheels, don't worry, we're not on fire.
Oh man, I love the what makes the scene so great is it's very humorous, but like he's like, oh, like when they finally get on the track of going in the right direction, and Palm like chases after him, like he's like, go right. Oh, I guess we're going straight. He's like, make a left. Oh, I guess we're going straight again. And it's just it's funny, it's great, it's entertaining, it's a great chase sequence. It leads to them going down I don't know, some kind of whatever that is, and they end up on the train tracks, and of course she has pickpocketed or not picking it, she has picked the cuffs off of herself on, and then she attaches it to the wheel, and we get this like tense sequence of like Ethan trying to escape, and he just takes the wheel with him
Yeah.
and drive it.
They never really show how he like the car doesn't explode, but like it's hit by the metro train, and all of a sudden he's free, and but he's still got the steering wheel attached to him.
Yeah, he probably just pulled that thing. It was probably so old, he just like pulled it off and got it out. But I like how he goes up the steps and he's still holding it as the police drives by. He's trying to hide it. He's like, guess I can't. He's like, I can't hide this. I do think it's a little kind of, I don't know. It's a little weird that Benji and Luther are able to find him so quickly. I don't know if they're following him on his like GPS cell phone or something like that, or how they're able to locate him so quickly. He's like, he looks over. He's like, oh,
Where were you 10 minutes
well.
ago when I was in the Fiat?
But of course, Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa Faust is with them as well, and they find themselves in is it Vienna? Or not Vienna.
Yeah. No, they go to Vienna.
Is it Vienna? I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought they were still in Rome, but they're in Germany or Austria.
No.
Oh no, they're in Venice. They go to Venice.
Right.
So they're still in.
Oh yeah,
Italy.
not Vienna, Venice. Yeah, I want to go to Venice now. Like I know people say it smells weird, but I really want to go there. I think it looks so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go anywhere in these places. I've never been to any of these places, so I want to go. I just want to go because I want to like find where they filmed Mission Impossible at, because they filmed Mission Impossible in cool places.
Well, you could go basically anywhere in the world, whether it's Sydney, Abu Dhabi, or you know,
You think
I don't know.
they'll let me hang off the side of Burj Khalifa?
I mean, yes, but I don't think they're gonna help you break through a window or anything. So
What if I brought my own cutting tools? You think they would do it?
you'd have to have some pretty hardcore cutting tools, I'm thinking.
We get our exposition scene. We find out who Gabriel is. We find out that the AI is using him as a technology piece. We find out that Grace is basically going to sell the key to a higher bidder, which we learn is the White Widow. This is a way for us to get Vanessa Kirby back into the mix as the White Widow. It's basically an exposition scene. It's basically allows us to see how the entity is using Gabriel as kind of a conduit in a lot of respects. It gives us Ethan and Ilsa a moment together, and we find out that Ilsa basically stole the key because she knew that Gabriel was coming after it. So that's the reason she did what she did. So fine, like I said, cool, whatever. It leads to the sequence of the rave, the nightclub sequence, which once again, I love nightclub sequences or raves in these movies because of the use of lighting, the use of people, the fact that it's merely a set piece more than anything. So it doesn't have any real purpose outside of just being where characters meet. And I love they have there's a hallway with like candles lit, which is like really cool looking. And I love the fact that the entity is basically the video walls and stuff like that, which is really cool. And
Oh yeah. Well, and the
yeah.
fact that it was there throughout, like, I don't know if you caught it from the first, but it's like, oh yeah, look, there's the entity. It's right, like that blue color, the way that it kind of does the thing. It's like, okay, that's clearly the entity. But
yeah, the thing about that is these people in this movie have no idea where the entity's at, but we do. So the fact that we're like one step ahead, so the fact that we see the entity on the screens, all that's there, that we already know this, but none of the main characters know this. So it's almost like we're almost more omnipotent than they are, which is kind of cool. Which is something that you never see in a spy movie where you're actually one step ahead of like Ethan Hunt, which I think was done on purpose. I think the fact that you know about the submarine, because it's revealed at the end that the place they need to find to shut down the entity is the submarine. So there's no like surprise, all the entities in this like big warehouse somewhere. No, Ethan Hunt, which has to go find the entity in the submarine. So it's like, oh yeah, we're already there. We've already know about this. So we're like one step ahead of everyone else.
Here's a question: is the warehouse that the entity would have been in surrounded by prairie dogs?
Sure, there's probably a bomb.
And the Ark is there, and
the Ark, and
you were
Charles
there.
Heston's Shaft.
I was there. It's good times.
The staff from Ten Commandments is there. And...
Yay!
No, but like I said, I found that kind of cool. I found that kind of neat. There's a lot of heavy stuff in this when it comes to, the fact that Gabriel shows up and the fact that Ilsa and Hunt show up, and there's this whole big kind of back and forth about the idea of the entity, the idea of like who it's for, who's buying it, the idea of like there's some conflict between Vanessa's White Widow character. It's all this stuff, and it brings up like Ethan Hunt is going to have something happen to him where there's going to be a choice to make where either Grace or Ilsa are going to be killed. It also brings up the fact that that there's gonna be a whole big train sequence. It brings up, foreshadows that like all this stuff leading up to right before the bridge sequence near the end of this whole big sequence. Like, what do you think overall of it? Because it's like a lot of exposition, but it's also stakes are being brought into the mix. There is like the pieces about where Gabriel says he's going to have the key by tomorrow. The White Widow is there to make a deal. All this stuff. Like, what do you think about the whole thing that's going on?
I mean, it kind of pulls a whole lot of threads kind of together. But mostly I'm just impressed by how the fact that they got all of those candles lit and not one of them went out as people ran by.
Yeah, Tom Cruise runs fast.
My God. That was, and I
like the wind.
I joke, but scenes like that, it's always amazing that they're able to light all of those candles. There's probably a bunch of poor schmucky PAs having to go down the line and like light all those candles, and it's like, okay, go.
They're flamethrower, Trev.
Yeah,
they just flamethrower. They're like, whoosh.
That is true.
Yeah,
The
no, I
stiff
mean
breeze
but
comes
that's,
along. But
I mean,
no,
think
no,
about, well, I was saying,
go
think
ahead.
about Lord of the Rings with all the chainmail. I mean,
Oh
they had to like
God.
individually like put those pieces together. Like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
people.
They had
That's
a
what the
chainmail
production crew is so
machine
good at.
running. No, they had a chainmail machine running for like I don't even know how many years, like 3 or 4 years, to get all the
Right.
chainmail that they needed for that. But no, I think that the thing is there's always that balance of exposition and everything, and you have to be able to say that stuff somehow. I think it was well laid out. They did a great job with it. I don't have any issues with the scene. So
No, it's great because it raises the stakes of Ethan Hunt's character now that he knows about the entity, the key, White Widow, and her involvement. I think Vanessa Kirby gets a lot to do in this movie, which is great. I do love that when Grace wears the mask of Vanessa Kirby's character, it doesn't look entirely like her. It almost feels like they added a little bit of makeup to Vanessa Kirby to make it look just a little off. Because
right.
like they made it maybe because of the eyes, because you can always tell an actor from their eyes. So maybe they added context to Vanessa Kirby to kind of make it look like Grace's character. So it was just a little off, which we've always talked about how realistic these masks look, but there's something a little bit off on the train when she goes. But it's a fun scene. It's very much the middle point of this movie, getting us to where we need to have Ethan go as an individual, as a character, the choices that he makes and how that affects everything. And I love the fact that as hard as Benji and Luther try, they can't help Ethan on the simple fact that this AI entity technology is not only scared of Ethan because Ethan is the individual that wants to destroy it. He doesn't want to own it. And I love that the entity takes over the technology and screws over Benji and Luther. And Benji's like, I gotta go off and I gotta find Ethan, and I gotta find Ilsa, and so on and so forth. And I love that what the scene really does is it shows that everything that Gabriel is saying, everything that Gabriel is doing is in service of this technology. So therefore, everything he says ends up being true. That one of the people that Ethan Hunt really cares about is going to die. So he's let off the course to the point where Paris and this other guy lock him into this like small alcove area, and they fight him. It's a great fight action sequence, but it also
Oh my
leads
God.
to, yeah, I mean, it's so well done. It's like very uncomfortable to watch if you have claustrophobia. I mean, it's great stuff, and like
Mhm. I mean, it's
it,
probably 2 feet wide, maybe by about, I don't know, 10 feet long. But it's a very narrow hall or narrow, like kind of close between two buildings, and they close the gates on either side. And it's Ethan and then Palm and then another guy. Pretty
yeah, and
big.
I love that she has a pipe and she like bangs it against the wall, kind of like Alex DeLarge would do in Clockwork Orange. This is why I like Palm's character in this movie, because she is an individual that is not. She's like the bone doctor, the bone saw doctor, whatever, in Rogue Nation,
Hmm.
where she could be like not very dimensional, but this character helps her character become somewhat dimensional because she has Ethan and her have this like badass fight sequence, and he ends up getting the best of her, but instead of killing her like he would have done to him, he saves her life. And I think that's great because it helps her character play a much more prominent role, or hopefully a much more prominent role in the next movie, where it starts to change her consciousness about like Ethan's supposed to be. I'm guessing the simple fact that she is brainwashed by Gabriel, or made to think by Gabriel that Ethan Hunt is a bad person, that he's going to kill whoever. But Ethan Hunt doesn't kill her, which probably surprises her. It makes her think something else. And I don't know
Oh
how you
yeah.
feel about that.
No, I think that's in a because Gabriel is pretty, like they describe him as wanting to see people suffer, and kind of that all around bad guy. There's no redeeming qualities. He's just there to be evil. He steps on a bug and
Yeah.
he's like ha 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 ha. To have that kind of sense of like old school morals, and say what you will, but that whole like kind of like honor amongst thieves kind of thing is kind of what you get with Paris, I think.
Yeah, and we'll see that played out later on. But Ethan basically running for his life to try and save Grace and Ilsa because he knows what's happening. But Grace, who has taken the weapons that Gabriel has placed placed on the table because he knows what they're going to be used for, and she's about to be knocked out. And that's when Ilsa comes into the mix, and Ilsa fights and eventually loses to Gabriel, who kills another person that Ethan Hunt. Yeah, I'm assuming Ethan Hunt really cared about the woman that Gabriel killed in his past. And it's the same thing here. Ilsa is killed, and I got to know what you think about this because it makes me a little annoyed that this is how Ilsa, unless they resurrect her in the next movie, if this is Ilsa's ending, it feels a little cheap, to be fairly honest. I mean, it's basically to allow Ethan to have a lot of pain in his heart to maybe the possibility he'll kill Gabriel. But I really don't like what they did with Ilsa's character. She's given really nothing to do in this movie outside the beginning. And like they give this romantic moment for them in this movie. And I knew exactly where this was going when they
Oh
said one
yeah,
of them has to
yeah.
die. It's like, I'm like, are they really going to kill off Rebecca Ferguson's character? Is this really how she's going to die? And it makes me realize that maybe they just didn't have anything for her in this movie. Maybe they just wanted her in this movie, but they just didn't really have enough written material in this 2 hour and 45-minute movie to do much with her. And I think that was the main problem with this movie outside
Right.
the two cop guys is just, I don't think they had enough for her. I don't think they
No.
really, honestly, as much as I hate to say it, Benji and Luther have their few moments, but they don't have a lot in this movie. I mean, Benji is basically driving around as he did in the last movie, and there's more to their characters. There's a whole point where Luther just disappears through the last hour of this movie because he has to go off and do whatever he needs to do, and Benji's just in the car. But there's really not a lot for them to do, but they have a lot more to do than Ilsa in this entire movie. It feels like she's sidelined. It's like it just like, why did you even bring her back? She maybe in the beginning have her run off and then pop up back in part two. But here she's not given anything to do, and then she dies to make Ethan suffer. And it's just I get why they're doing it, but it feels like a very cheap move.
No, I agree. I think that she was done dirty with that. And uh, with movies like this, especially where it's a personal type of story, there's always going to be something in this respect. I mean, she does her badass stuff. She doesn't go down easy. But yeah, it is the way she goes out just being taken out on a bridge in Venice. I mean, there are worse ways to go, but it's kind of, I don't know, it is a little weird. A lot of characters get taken out like that, though. I mean,
Yeah, I mean it's a very
it's an odd.
casualty of war
No, no,
situation. It's
no. But I
just
just mean that the way it's like they couldn't decide on what else to do. And I agree. I think that if with her character, if you were gonna do something, let it be something epic. Because I mean, she is a pretty badass character. She deserves a badass way out. And even if you had her,
yeah.
when they showed her in a like in the desert and she's quote dead, I assumed that she would show up sometime later and kick ass. Like the fact that they kind of do the whole like jump back to it and Ethan's like, "Hey, okay, you're not dead, but you are dead. Go hide or something like that." I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean she has
It's
a
fine.
couple well, she has a couple cool action sequences like where she flips over the chair and she has a cool like fighting sequence between Gabriel and her, but it's just like you really didn't leave her much to do in this movie. It's just like
No.
you have more for Palm to do in this movie as somebody who's not really a talkative side character than you have as a main character for this movie. It
She
just
spoke with her fists. I will
and then
say,
she spoke with her heart as she died.
exactly. Well, she had a knife through her heart when she went. But I think, and this is random and everything else, but being that this is a Ethan's story above and beyond everything else, I do think that your focus is going to be because for a couple of those movies there was ensemble cast, but I mean look at Luther. He was kind of there and gone a good chunk with the past couple movies. Same with Benji. He wasn't like a consistent by Ethan's side kind of a guy. I mean, it is for as much of an ensemble cast as these things can be, it is still an Ethan Hunt movie.
No,
So,
I know it is. You're right. It definitely is that. I just feel that they could have done her better.
oh
It's the
no,
same thing.
I agree. They did her
Yeah.
dirty, and if they weren't sure, and I suppose it's one of those things where it's like, oh, we got this great storyline. Oh, we're going along great, and all of a sudden it's like, shit, we ran out of stuff for her to do. That stuff can happen, but I don't know how you rectify that. And who knows. I don't know. Have they? I guess it's one of those things where IMDb probably wouldn't have like who's gonna be in it yet as much.
Right.
But I
And
don't
it
know.
could be also the effects of COVID, like things could have been changed around. I mean, it's
Oh
always
yeah.
possible because
Did you
this movie
notice
had a
that
long.
things were shot weird, like to some extent? Like things were incredibly tight. I don't know. Some of the shooting just felt like not bad, but just weird to me. Like the way
I
things
mean,
were
they had a
filmed.
different cinematographer for this movie than
Mm,
they had in the last movie, so that could be as
that might
well.
have been it
But I
too.
mean, COVID definitely probably had an effect on some of the storylines in this
Oh
movie.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe
that
things
makes
were
sense.
changed for certain reasons, but kind of moving along
I mean,
that.
Ethan had to social distance on top of a mountain.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it's COVID, so we're just gonna shoot the top of a mountain.
Yeah, basically.
Um,
He goes full
but
Sound of Music.
but basically, as we've learned, the train is going to be the big set piece, the hour-long set piece of this movie. But before that, we get like a small moment where we learn something huge about the IMF and how the IMF operates. These individuals, and like Grace, were individuals that made a choice. They could either go to jail, they could either be killed, or they could come work as a ghost, a spy, is somebody who does things that could be considered very, very dangerous. And I find that interesting because they call it the choice. And this is something that's never been talked about, how the IMF becomes to be, but it also allows this franchise and this group of individuals to have some kind of soul to them, because really before they were just characters that were brought in to do missions. But here you find that, like Grace, they all lived in this world that was, very dangerous, and they were brought in to basically be protectors, or they would gone to jail, like Ethan Hunt. Ethan Hunt was going to go to jail for the murder of this woman, and he made the choice to work for the IMF because they found special skills in him. And basically it leads to Grace agreeing to go onto the train because the face tech breaks down, but the mask for her. But I mean, the idea of the choice. I mean, like, what do you think about that?
I really like the idea of it because before this you kind of just assume, okay, they go through like CIA or FBI, you go through a series of classes, you get your specialties, boom, you're out doing the thing. But the fact that
Yeah.
it almost becomes a case of, well, your options are either death, jail, or this. And what, wow, great options. Can I get a cookie as well? But no, I really appreciated that. And the fact that like Luther, like, I mean, I think that Luther has a real moment here as he kind of discusses it. Like Benji a little bit less so, but I mean, and Luther has
Yeah,
always been
Benji.
kind of that heart of this kind of a thing too. So
Right. The Benji stuff is a little weird to me. Benji made the choice. Like he was a CIA tech guy, so he made the choice to be an IM. And that is a little weird to me that Benji made that choice, because Benji doesn't seem like the kind of person that would make a choice like that. Like he was just kind of, I don't know. Luther I can see, Ethan Hunt I can see, everybody in the IMF I can see, but because we have so much history with Benji's character, unlike the rest of the characters, I just found that really weird.
yeah, no, I don't know. I guess I, I don't know. I guess it I appreciated what they let loose of, but beyond that, yeah, I'm not 100% sure on how to tell it.
Yeah,
So
I do like the fact that like Grace questions why there's not more details, and he's like, Benji goes, "Yeah, it's probably better. It's probably better. It's usually better that way. Not enough
details
detail. We
screw
just go."
things up. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the fact that they're showing us like how the mission's supposed to go, but then it doesn't. Of course, it's Mission Impossible. It never goes the way it's supposed to. So there's no way that Ethan Hunt's going to be able to go on the train as Zola. So he's going to have to find a way to hit the curve of when the train's going slow to jump on. To all this stuff. But as we know, even that's not going to work because
Nope.
Gabriel is in a box. He needs to be taken out of the box by Palm's character, who's on the top of uh she's on the top of a bridge. She jumps on. She like has this really cool like run over on the train. Grace is gonna go on as the White Widow character, so she can make the transaction to get the keys. But as we can tell, Gabriel, his ultimate wisdom of having the power of the entity, he's able to destroy not only kill the two conductors of the train, but he destroys the brakes. He destroy he destroys the thing that makes the train go fast and
The
slow.
accelerator. Yeah.
Yeah, he hangs the guy and connects him to the whistle. Grace knocks out, of course, the White Widow, which I love that scene where she like wakes up, she's like, it's like rubbing her nose, she just like falls back asleep.
She does that a
But
couple, like she plays well against herself.
yeah, I love that Ethan Hunt's put enough worry into her, enough like conflict that she when she goes into that room, she's like, am I doing the right thing? But then of course Grace knocks her out and then goes to talk to, as we find out, is Kittredge, which I think is interesting because it's not really implied that he's the buyer, but I get it. I get that the Americans would have enough pull that they would be the buyer of all this stuff. And Kittredge is probably buying the key because he feels that Ethan Hunt can't do the job. And on top of everything, Paris and Gabriel go to meet Dillinger. This is what I was talking about. Dillinger didn't need to be in this movie. This whole scene didn't need to be in this movie. How's Dillinger all of a sudden is a turncoat? He all of a sudden knows where the entity is located. It's like at no point in this movie is any of this given that he could be that guy. It's really stupid. It's turncoat for turncoat's sake. And he's like, we're gonna make an alliance, and he gets killed. But it's just like, I just feel like they needed some way to have a bad guy be an American, and it didn't need to happen. It really didn't. It's so stupid.
No, I get it. I was kind of mixed on this scene. It's kind of like, oh, okay, we're going with that trope. Because I mean it is a trope. It's used frequently and it's used
I mean,
indiscriminately.
once again, have Carrie Elwes be in the opening scene, maybe that other scene that they show him in, but it's just like you threw him into the mix. Now you threw him in to be a bad guy. It's just like you didn't need that at all. There's no justification for that at all. It's just
okay, so here's where I'm at with this, and I'm kind of two minds. On one side, if anyone's gonna know like the quote ins and outs of that, the subtleties, the chief of like the national defense is probably gonna be the one to know that secret. I suppose with Kittredge balancing those two agencies off of each other, it's kind of a continuation of what happened at the Open. Because I mean, Dillinger does question what IMF does, kind of the reason that why do they exist. So I mean, kind of playing those two things off each other to some extent, sort of I could see happening. The ins and outs of the actual why I can't say, but those two things I could see. But yeah, it is a trope that's played to Kingdom Come. So
right. I'm like,
no, I
and
get
of course,
it.
Shea Wiggum and Greg Davis are on the train. It's just like, why are they on this train? It's so
Because
stupid. Because reasons. Because anal.
yes,
I don't know. It's
because Uranus.
but anyways, Ethan misses the train, and so they have to devise a new way to get on the train. I do love this stuff between Benji and Ethan because once again, it's like that sequence of Fallout where Benji is mistaking the iPad for like the direction of the iPad and like the location of whatever. But what he's not telling Ethan, in order to get to the train, he has to climb up this mountain with the motorcycle that he has. But he's not telling Hunt about this. He's not telling him at all. He's just like, keep driving. I'll tell you when you need to stop. He's like, I'm going uphill. At what point do I go downhill? I was like, at some point eventually, you'll go downhill. And then, like I said, he switches over. He switches the car to autopilot or whatever. He gets in the driver's seat and he's like, "Oh, this is probably not going to go well." He puts on the seatbelt, which I thought was pretty funny. So I love the small moments with Benji and just kind of how he's like always thinking about, oh yeah, this car probably would crash at some point, like hit with him in the driver's seat.
Oh yeah, that's
But
I thought for sure the entity was gonna come along and pull some shit on the self-drive car, but he didn't, so that was nice.
well, that's the other thing. Like they're having to, for instance, Luther has to go off and find out where the entity's at and stuff like that, and he basically explains to the Ethan's like, you got to make sure the entity doesn't win, so you got to be in the right space of mind. You can't kill Gabriel. You have to think about it because I know you, Ethan. I know your heart. I know the fact that it's like when Ethan goes, Grace goes, how I know you protect me. Like Luther goes, "We'll protect you." And Ethan was like, "I can't. I can never protect you, but I mean, I can never guarantee your safety, but I can always put myself yourself before myself." The same thing here. It's like getting in the heart to who Ethan is like he's a guy who protects his, or at least tries to protect his people, but he can't guarantee their safety. As we've seen through the many movies, people that he knows and loves have died, or people that he loves have been had to go into hiding because they are now numero uno on the hit list and stuff like that. And the same thing here. He's like, Grace asked Kittredge for the choice. We can guarantee that you'll last a little bit longer, but I can't guarantee your safety. And it shows that Ethan is starting to come to the realization that his safety and other people's safety is more important than his, but he can't guarantee it.
Right. No, absolutely. But one real quick thing, I do think that kind of shows a good leader. To give absolutes in a time when there's no way you can honestly give absolutes, I think is, it's a very straightforward, honest thing. And especially when in Venice, Gabriel told Grace that, oh, well, he'll promise to save your life. And Ethan does the opposite of that. He says, hey, you know what? I can't guarantee I can protect you, but God damn it, I will do my damnedest to try to keep you safe.
Yeah, and Kittredge says it in the voiceover at the end. It's like, you just bought her time. You bought her time. That's all you can do. That's all you've done. But like everyone else, your consequences will have actions, or actions will have consequences and stuff like that. And
right.
I mean, it's the same thing here. He's putting her into a really deadly situation where, Kittredge or anybody finds out who she is, and she could be killed. And she's like, "You're going to be on the train." He's like, "I guarantee you I'll be on the train." How he gets on the train is very funny, but anyways, he travels all. I like the fact that like it goes through this train sequence, so you actually forget about Ethan Hunt for a little bit, and then you go back to him, and he finds himself at the top of a mountain, almost falling off the mountain, but at the top of the mountain, he looks down. And he's like, and I love how Benji's like biting his nail as he's talking to him and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, you're gonna have to jump. He's like, I'm on the side of a mountain. He's like, there's cliffs. He starts like Ethan Hunt starts talking about the mountain and stuff like that. He's like, I'm Benji does the thing. I'm under a lot of stress here. And Ethan's like, I'm on the side of a mountain.
And that's one of those things that recurs too. Like that seems to be a conversation that they have more often than not. Like Benji's like when he was putting the things up on the doors in at the Burj Khalifa. And then he's like, oh man, that was really stressful. And Ethan is sitting there like, haha, I just worked my way around the outside of the damn building.
Yeah, it's crazy. But he looks around, he sees the peak of the mountain. And of course, this has been behind the scenes of death. But Tom Cruise, scaring investors and insurance people once again, he is going to drive the bike off the side of a really tall mountain to clear the mountain to find a way by parachuting into the train. Now you can see the CGI where they CGI'd out the boards
ramp,
the ramp and stuff like that. So it is a little noticeable. But this is one of the scenes where I'm pretty sure it was an IMAX where Tom Cruise drove that motorcycle off the side of a cliff, off the side of a mountain, and the action scenes when him flying down the mountain, the camera work following him down the mountain is some of the most exhilarating stuff I've seen in Mission Impossible, and just the nature of like, you're watching him fly or watching him fall, you're watching him parachute, but you're also like right next to him as he's talking to Benji. He's like, I'm trying to clear this mountain. It's just, I mean, I don't know. Like we've talked about it many times already. Tom Cruise is an insane person.
Oh,
and the
absolutely.
stuff he's willing to do for cinema is insane. It makes him like one of the best. I'm just
gonna say it though, and this is probably gonna be a hot take amongst hot takes. Is it bad that, and I guess maybe I just like car chases. I loved the car chase. Like this was incredible and amazing, and like a holy shit, he just did the thing off the thing, and especially in IMAX, holy shit. But in the grand scheme of actual shots, I really, really like the car chase a little bit better than this.
Well, the car chase is more visceral. This is more exhilarating. This is like the Halo jump or something like that. I definitely see that there are levels of intensity. This comes to my fear of heights, so him jumping off. Like if I watch this IMAX, I'll probably grip in my chair when stuff like that. But it's like the Burj Khalifa stuff. But that's what it boils down to. But
no, fair.
Yeah. So, anyways, he jumps down. Grace decides she's not going to take the $100 million in cryptocurrency or whatever. It confuses everybody. They walk off. They're chasing after her, and they get to the dining car. Zola, basically, she pulled off the mask. Zola is like, "Give me the key." She lays the key on the table, and then the guy tells her to kill her, and all of a sudden, like in the jump, like almost like a jump scare, almost like Ethan comes in like sidecar.
That
It's
was
the guy
awesome.
knocks the
I
guy out the
laughed my
window.
ass off at that.
Yeah, and he knocks out Zola. It's so hilarious.
Oh, it's great. Absolutely hilarious.
But it leads to Ethan's gonna go after Gabriel, who's taking the key. Like I said, Gabriel's killed. He's actually killed Dillinger, and because he knows about what Paris is gonna do, he stabs her. Supposedly mortally wounds her, stuff like that. And it leads Grace to go try to stop the train. It leads Ethan to go after Gabriel. It's reminiscent to the first Mission Impossible, where they're fighting on top of the train. Gabriel's waiting for a specific moment to jump onto a truck, but it leads into like the tunnel where it's a really cool where like they're avoiding the red lights and stuff like that. Where
Oh, that's so cool.
where Dennis Hopper got knocked his head off and stuff like that, and then like Gabriel's throwing like trying to hit him with his knife and stuff like that.
You mean John Voight, not Dennis Hopper?
Well, no, I was making a joke how Dennis Hopper got hit by the
Oh,
speed.
sorry. Yeah, apologies. I'm a dork.
But
Forgive
in essence,
me!
it basically leads to Ethan Hunt and Gabriel fighting, and then Shea Wiggum and Greg Davis stop Ethan, who says, "No, you need to get him." And they're like, "I don't care about them. I want you." Gabriel falls off into the truck. He sets off the bombs for the explosion for the bridge.
And that bridge was
And
cool, damn it.
yeah, yeah. And
Those
this is what we talked
assholes.
about, how it's a homage to the general.
Oh yeah,
So,
no, totally could see that.
but it leads to Ethan Hunt going back to Grace, and Grace says, "I can't do anything about this." So they disconnect the main engine car to set the brakes off, the emergency brakes on the train. Of course, the engine car of the train flies off like the general, the Buster Keaton movie and stuff like that. This leads to a really fun action sequence where it's very similar. I know you probably don't know this, but a lot of people will. Uncharted 2 has a train sequence where at the very end of the train sequence, Drake has to climb up the sides of these trains that are kind of leaning off the cliffs and stuff like that could fall to their death. But it's the same thing here. The pieces of the train cars are falling off.
Oh, that's so
They have to
great.
find a way. So they're like in the kitchen car. There's grease everywhere. There's a fire. They're able to escape before the train explodes. It falls off. They get themselves into a couple
The
other trains,
dining
but then they
car.
find themselves.
Yeah.
The dining car. I love that they're like, when the train goes up, they actually float up and then they fall down, kind of like zero gravity a little bit, which is really cool.
There's
And
a
then
grand piano at the one point.
well, yeah, like the train's now like doing the Jurassic World or Lost World thing where they're hiding they're like on the side of one of the dining tables. And Ethan's like, "I'm gonna have to jump over here. Let me go. I'm gonna have to let me go. I have to jump." He's like, she's holding on to him. He's like, and like she jumps before the grand piano falls and destroys and almost kills them. And they're trying to climb up this dining car, and then at the last minute, Palm saves them, and they're able to get off in a very like Fallout moment where like you don't know if they're still on the train when it falls, but Paris's character saves them and they're able to get up to the car that's not going to fall. But I mean, it's a lot of fun. The sequence is a lot of fun. It's entertaining. It's very thrilling. Like it's a good little topper to this really long action set piece that is like an hour long. It's almost it's like probably 45 minutes, but it's really long. But what do you think about it?
There's one thing that you missed that I really enjoyed. So, the two cops go by Kittredge, and he says,
Oh,
"Well,
yeah.
I'm not here." And then when they're trying to move all the people on the train all the way to the back of the train, he's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Well, you're not here, so I don't have to tell you." Kind of. No, the action set piece is fantastic. It's well choreographed. It keeps you, and obviously I think for the most part that they're going to make it, but they do keep the suspense up. It's like, oh well, they didn't fall off with the engine, they're going to be okay, and then it's like, oh shit, there goes the kitchen car and the dining car and the bar car and this lounge car. What are they gonna do?
Yeah,
and
and then
yeah, so
and Paris saves him at the end, which is kind of great. And then she basically gives away the where is this thing at? And she tells him it's a submarine, and he goes off to do it's a specific type of like not parachuting, but it's a specific type of like
kind of a
way
gliding.
skydivers.
It's like a
Yeah,
skydive, or it's like a gliding thing.
yeah, which is apparently very dangerous from what I hear.
Yeah, I
So
remember them
Tom
talking about
Cruise
that
doing it
in
is
the
not
behind the
surprising, but
scenes. Yeah, no,
um
absolutely.
but basically Grace tells Kittredge what Ethan told her to tell him, and he says interesting, and that's when we get the VO of I love the Wrath of Khan homage where Gabriel realizes that Ethan has a key, and Gabriel goes hunt. So you tell Gabriel's pissed, and it leads to the voiceover of Kittredge who says, you can't save Grace, good luck to you, Ethan. And Ethan is able to go off with Benji into Dead Reckoning Part 2, and we get a shot of the submarine. And that's the end of Dead Reckoning Part 1. And I have theories about Part 2, which I'll get to in a second. But yeah, with all that said, we move kind of quickly through the train stuff. I could talk for an hour about that. But I mean, what do you think about this? I mean, with all that said, like, what's your favorite moment of this movie?
Oh, definitely the Rome car chase. I adore that so much, especially with the Fiat. I will also say the fight that took place in like the very narrow and long I guess alleyway thing.
So
Just
she said.
fantastic. Yeah, just amazing. I mean, all the action set pieces, for whatever the story lacked, the action set pieces are so bombastic and cinematic and just wired for sound. I mean, they don't half-ass anything. And not to say that Mission Impossible does, but these were just, at least for me. And again, big screen, first time seeing a Mission Impossible on the big screen since one of the earlier movies. And I know that makes a difference, but just some of the best set pieces or action set pieces that I've seen. So
Yeah, and I like the fact that I think the movie has topped itself to the point where it can't really, outside of Tom Cruise going into space, which he's going to do in a movie, you can't really top yourself anymore. So I think being inventive with your action sequences, it helps it. So they could do like a jump off a mountain, which isn't the Burj Khalifa in any form of like how big they can go, but they can still make it feel fun and fresh. And they can still make it. I mean, they can add a chase sequence in there, like a car chase, and they can add all these stuff which has been done before, and it works. It really does. It feels like
it's a smarter, not harder thing. It's kind of like the opposite way of thinking that Fast and Furious uses.
Exactly. And a lot of it not being CGI, it always helps too. So
oh yeah, absolutely.
Now with that said, I have no idea how this movie's going to do. As we're talking about this movie just opened, but I'm sure it'll do pretty well. It's going to be one of those movies that has legs. I know it's going up against Barbie and Oppenheimer, but I think it's going to do pretty well, at least compared to the other movies that have come out this summer.
Yeah.
Now with Part 2, I have theories about there's going to be a free dive in the ice. Because Tom Cruise, maybe I think maybe Tom Cruise will do something like that. It looks like he's definitely flying a plane at some point. I don't know, but I have a really fun observation that I noticed. So this movie takes place at the beginning in the Arctic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're in the middle of the ice. They're underneath the ice. Now, I don't know if you remember, but there was a guy named William Dunlow who was the guy that got sent. That was the one that when they're in Langley in the first movie.
Oh yeah, it was in Siberia, wasn't he?
I think when Ethan Hunt goes to find this submarine, I think he's going to find William Dunlow still in Siberia or Antarctic.
Oh, that'd be hilarious.
And like he's gonna knock on the door, and there's gonna be William Dunlow. The problem with the series is Kittredge. Unless you know the first movie very well, you're not going to remember this character. Some people will, like myself, but same thing with like the William Dunlow character. There's going to be a lot of people who don't know who he is. So the callback's going to be it's going to, this isn't like, bringing back like Paula Patton or something like that. You bring in a character that's kind of obscure from that one scene,
but
it's going to be a nice little callback.
Oh yeah, totally. And I think that's kind of I mean, there's a lot of movies that call on Easter eggs. I mean, look at any comic book movie, and they're packed full of them. But like the guy that played the one scientist in the what was it Spider-Man Far From or No Way Home. Like I
Yeah.
wouldn't have known him from a hole in the ground until he said, "Oh, well, I'm such and so." I mean, I think the people that are gonna know and appreciate it. The others will be like, "Oh, hey, this is a random guy that's stuck here, poor schmuck," that kind of a thing. So,
You know who played that scientist, right? The one in Spider-Man and Iron Man.
I can't think straight
It's
anymore
Peter
tonight.
Billingsley.
Oh my god, that's awesome. I think I think I
Yeah.
did know that at one point, but yeah, my brain is kind of mush at this point.
Yeah, mine is too. But yeah, I
Yay,
mean, I
mushy
mean overall,
brains.
but anyways, but yeah, with that said, I think this movie is great. I think it has its problems, but I think it's fun. I think it's entertaining. I think the fact that Christopher McQuarrie has become like a prominent action director, has worked with Tom Cruise for 15 years now, apparently, because he worked with him on all kinds of script duties and
Oh
he
yeah.
wrote a whole bunch of stuff. It's a really, really long but really tight movie with a lot of personal stakes and a lot of great action set pieces. And I can't wait for part two. I think part two is gonna, as long as they don't screw it up, I think part two will knock it out of the park. And I think there's a chance that this movie franchise could keep going because there's Tom Cruise says he might want to do more films after this. So that'll bring in effect like whether Ethan Hunt will die at the end of part two, which could be a possibility. But I mean, any closing thoughts on this movie before we head out?
Uh, don't be a Phineas freak, and just jump,
Jump, jump, jump, jump.
jump for my
Yeah.
love, jump in. Feel the
Oh
touch.
man. But yeah, that's a good way to close out this 3 hour review. I think we've been talking for like
Exactly.
3 hours now. I
Oh
only wanted to go
shit.
like an hour and a half, and we've been doing like 3 hours. So,
Well, yeah, that's kind of
anyways,
typical for us because we're Gabby.
exactly. So can't wait to edit this. Anyways,
Yeah.
with that said, definitely go watch it. I'm gonna go watch it in IMAX probably soon before Oppenheimer comes into the mix. But definitely one of my favorite movies of the year. I think I'm gonna put it in my top 10 most
Oh
likely.
yeah.
So yeah.
It was
So
definitely a lot of fun. Like it just it was about an hour 20 for me to go where there was an IMAX, and I it, I was sucking it up pretty hardcore going into the movie, but I left so invigorated, and it was just it was such a fun movie. Like there was just it balanced humor and action, and like I say, the scripting had issues, there was issues with characters, but by and large, god, just what I would want from from a summer blockbuster. And I mean, in the grand scheme, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way because it's super easy to take that route, but it was such a fun blockbuster, and it felt old school. It didn't feel like it was 2023 for that. So that's always nice.
and yeah, I agree. It's this is some of the times those some of the best. So
Yeah.
but anyways, with that said, that's gonna close it out on our Mission Impossible run through, at least until Dead Reckoning Part 2 comes out, whether next year or whenever it comes out. So Triv, until then, it's been awesome. I talk to you almost every day anyway, so I'll talk to you
Yay.
probably tomorrow.
Woo.
But for the time being, as we close out this run through, where's your content at?
Oh, you can find it on the top of a mountain, which you'll have to access via a dirt bike that takes you up some very absolutely fantastic ass scenery. That is one other thing. The scenery in this sucker, especially the train part of it, was just oh my god, just like you could film in any direction, and it was just beautiful. But anyway,
Exactly.
less beautiful is my theater. You can find me here on YouTube at Trivial Theater. I do a wide array of random, obscure, straight up bad movies. I've got probably the newest thing I've done is Future War, but I am working on a piece with this knucklehead above me or next to me or wherever he ends up being. We're doing Meet the Feebles. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's a really great riff and collab. So definitely stop by the channel and check that out.
Excellent. Yes. Meet the Feebles. Interesting film.
Meet the Feebles. Meet the. That was one thing that was missing from this movie was the Feebles.
Right, right. That fly in the toilet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, with that said, everything that we talked about Mission Impossible is on my channel, Movie Emporium. Of course, Jurassic World or Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones. I'm now doing week by week for the After Party season 1 or season 2. Look forward to that.
Fantastic, man, I tell you.
Yeah, exactly. So with that said, yeah, all that content's there. So that'll do it for Mission Impossible for the time being until we get to Dead Reckoning Part 2 in 2024. Hopefully maybe at that point in June. So Triv, once again, thank you for joining me in this like many weeks
Absolutely.
process of
It's been
doing
fun.
this. Exactly. So that's it. We're gonna head out. Mission accomplished for the time being, and for myself
Mission
and Triv,
accomplished.
it's not mission difficult. It's mission reckoning. Peace out, guys.
Dum 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 dum.
Did I do this like
No, not really, actually.
yeah? Slobber.
Ah.